Out to Turner. The rainbow is worth 3.
Jonathan Taylor having a monster game.
Joseph Newgarden takes him down to the white line. They battle for the lead at 3.
Richardson on a design run. Touchdown! Indy.
This is the Fan Morning Show with KB, JB, and Jeff.
Good morning, made it all the way to Thursday. No real basketball of note other than Butler last night, and they had another tough night. They lose to Xavier. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Pacers on the road tonight. We'll get into that, but a lot going on. James Boyd, Kevin Bowen, good to see you guys bright and early this morning. You were here at like 4:15 this morning, James. You didn't want to miss the first 30 seconds of the show.
Nah. I was like, after the chaos of yesterday morning and waking up and panicking, it was a lot more simple to just wake up on time and get here on time. As my dad said, I was talking to my dad about this, and he's just like, get out the bed when the alarm goes off. Thanks, Dad. That's great advice. I didn't think of that at all.
Well, he's just there to help.
Hey,
that's all it is. KB and JB, I got a question for you guys because something happened in the NBA last night that I thought was interesting. First of all, James Harden had a huge night, 50 points, and the Clippers got a big win. But what was more important in that game, KB? That he scored 50 points or that he played 38 minutes on the second night of a back-to-back in which he played in both games in today's NBA? Which is more remarkable?
Oh, take that, load management, right? There you go. Okay.
You just don't see that anymore, right?
I did not realize that from James Harden. There we go. Hat tip to the future Hall of Famer.
JB, are we going to see much of that moving forward?
I think so. I think that there's a handful of players who don't play all the time, and I think that just kind of develops a life of its own. It is not a huge issue, in my opinion, and obviously the Pacers play. So as long as Halliburton and Siakam are out there, I don't think too many people here are complaining about load management.
Well, that's just one of the things. Mark, about your night last night, I saw all kinds of chatter yesterday about AEW and all the storylines that are going on there, and it immediately made me think of you.
Yeah, it should be because they got they have a pay-per-view on Saturday night, AEW Revolution, so I'll be watching that as well, being a degenerate once again. But, we had the Cena heel turn last weekend. What are we going to get this Saturday? I don't know. I'm excited to find out.
All right, KB, what did you do without a plethora of college basketball to watch last night?
Yeah, I did watch a little bit of Butler action, and shout out to my Irish, baby. Cole Serta from the corner at about 11:01 p.m. last night. Micah Shrewsbury and company beating, I think Stanford's a tournament team. So I will celebrate that here on this Thursday morning. So, there was part of me, I got to admit, guys, that last night I'm like, am I really doing this? Am I really going to go until 11 o'clock here? Is this going to be worth it? And sure enough, the Irish delivered for me. It was a reward of fandom for me, and I really needed it. I haven't had many of those late-night moments this season. Mark will recall earlier this year I stayed up until 2 a.m. when Notre Dame played Rutgers in Vegas. Their best player blew up his knee that night. It was miserable. So last night I was rewarded, and then this morning I walked out to the car and saw snow on it.
Yeah, I saw little flurries last night. I was thinking about this yesterday, too. Where does your deep-seated love for Notre Dame come from?
My brother instilled a lot of it in me. So, yeah, it's kind of boring. But basically, my grandma's brother was a professor there. So my grandma, being a supportive sister, was a huge, huge Notre Dame fan. She instilled that in her son, Dan. So my Uncle Dan and my grandmother, rest in peace to her. She ingrained that into my older brother, 5.5 years older than me. And so when I was born into the world, I just did whatever he did. So here we are.
Sounds like a good thing. What about you, JB? What was your college? Was it Illinois growing up, or what was the story there?
Yeah, by default, I felt like it was just, once you see D. Brown with the headband and the run they went on, everyone from where I grew up wanted to be a part of that. And so that was pretty fun. Fun fact, my dad is actually, he's a Hoosiers fan. He likes Indiana because even though he's from Chicago, he loves Isaiah Thomas. And so Isaiah Thomas going to IU was big for him. And so he likes the Hoosiers. Didn't like the other night, obviously, but likes where they are and hopes that they can get into the tournament.
I was at that crazy game, Illinois-Arizona, the overtime game on Illinois' run to the Final Four. That still is one of the top 3 college basketball games I've ever been to.
Hey, man, it was a great time to be alive. Great time.
KB, what are you looking forward to with the Indiana Pacers back in action, hitting the road for a minute here? They're a half game behind the Milwaukee Bucks now for that 4th spot in the Eastern Conference. What are you looking to see?
Well, I would start with the injury report. I mean, you brought up load management, things like that. Tyrese Halliburton is questionable. Now, I think he's been questionable a handful of times this season and still played. I believe he's still only missed one game all season. So I guess to kind of James's point earlier, I do think at times the whole load management can get a tad overblown league-wide when it comes to stars. Do we see Benedict Mathurin back in the lineup? I thought Rick Carlisle, when he spoke with us on Tuesday, seemed to believe that Thursday was a real possibility. Sounded like Monday they had, pretty intense workout. The plan was for one yesterday. We'll see about that. And I just think in general now it's can you take your act on the road? And I think it's team-wise, and it's also a little bit of Halliburton-wise. Remember early in the year, and this is probably more of a conversation we had around Thanksgiving, maybe even into December, the road-home splits for Halliburton were just, frankly, alarming how different they were. They haven't played out like that necessarily the entire season, but again, with 6 of 7 on the road, you just mentioned it. Milwaukee's a half game above you. If all of a sudden you are on the road for round one, then that becomes more of a storyline. So individually for Halliburton, team-wise as well, 6 of 7 now on the road. They'll do one of these baseball series here with the Hawks tonight and Saturday. I think both are 7:30 tips, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So Pacers-Hawks coming up tonight. Our coverage will begin at 7.
Curious, James. They haven't been terrible on the road. They're 15-15 on the road, 19-9 at home. We've seen a different Halliburton over the last, really, since the All-Star break. If that continues, do you expect that road split to really increase in the differential between wins and losses?
Yeah, I think it almost has to, especially when it comes to just playoff seeding and where you want to be. I don't think you can continue to split road games. And like KB said, 6 of your next 7 are on the road. You want to kind of handle business and get some of these wins. And you look at Atlanta, for example, they're not a good team. They're struggling this season, and they haven't had a lot of success. So you don't want to, get too complacent or think that you can just walk in and beat them, but you definitely want to handle business. And I think that, this is a great opportunity to get 2 on the road against Atlanta. You get the day off in between, which should help with some rest and recovery. So I'm looking at their next few games. They have a back-to-back in Chicago and Milwaukee, but those first 2 games against Atlanta, I think you can set the tone for your road trip.
But they do have a day between Atlanta and Chicago, I believe. 8th for the second Atlanta game, the 10th for Chicago.
Yeah,
and then it's the back-to-back coming
Chicago,
back from Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So coming back there. All 3 of those games, even on the road, certainly winnable, Kevin, you would think.
Well, and one thing, and again, this is a little bit schedule in the weeds here, but one thing to note, you guys bring up Milwaukee next week. The Pacers will play both of those games off of a back-to-back. Milwaukee will play neither of them off a back-to-back. That is bad scheduling luck for the Pacers here coming up next week.
I think the league is just out to get them, personally.
Aren't they always?
Don't think I'm going to go conspiracy theory here. I don't think I'm ready for that at 7:07 here on this Thursday morning. But that is the bummer, and they will travel. They'll travel back to Indianapolis for the one coming up on Tuesday. They'll travel from Philly to Milwaukee next weekend. So those will be the biggest games of the regular season, and unfortunately for the Pacers. And that's why I think these other games, you have to kind of go above and beyond and try to take care of business because you've already lost 2 to Milwaukee this season. You had opportunities, of course, earlier this year. So just something to note because I think next week, I know there's not a lot of weeks, even in March you point to during the regular season, you're like, oh, this is your make or break week. I don't think it carries that magnitude, Saturday, for example, will carry for Indiana when they take on Ohio State in a very bubblicious game. Next week, though, for an NBA regular season, especially in early to mid-March, it is huge for the Pacers.
Yeah, Milwaukee's playing really good basketball right now. They've won 8 of their last 10. They win last night. Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes the 52nd player, JB, to have scored 20,000 points in the NBA. It seems like, really, already?
Yeah, shout out to Giannis. He has a book, actually. Miriam Fader wrote a book about him. I have it at home. It's about his whole life story, and when you read that, you kind of get more perspective of how crazy his journey really is. It's probably similar to Siakam, coming from a background that didn't have much basketball in it, and, basketball kind of found him, and then he obviously took it across the world. So, Giannis is one of those guys I think it's easy to root for. If you're not an Indiana Pacers fan because of the basketball debacle, last season, I believe, or a couple seasons ago. And so I would love to see that matchup in the playoffs just because I like hate. And you know me, I don't like anybody to like each other. And I think that, obviously, I know Kevin pointed it out, those 2 games against Milwaukee are going to be huge. And so you definitely don't want him to, be getting any milestones then.
Also, the Big Ten women's tournament is in town. I was coming right down Meridian today, and just before I turned off to come into work. I saw at the Circle they had the Big Ten, real logo up in front of the Circle, so people are excited about that. We will have the Oregon head coach on at 8:05 this morning. But Indiana goes in as a 9th seed this year, a little lower than they've been recently, but the Big Ten continues to have some really strong teams and fascinating personalities on the women's side, even after Caitlin Clark, KB.
Well, that's a bubblicious game at noon. Indiana and Oregon. I think if you look at the women's bracketology, both those teams currently, I think maybe on the right side of the bubble, but you certainly don't want to play with fire. Winner will get Juju Watkins, and USC is the one.
Congratulations.
And, certainly, she is extremely decorated of a talent. So yeah, busy weekend last night. We saw Caitlin Clark in the house over there as Iowa pulled away from Wisconsin. We will have Jan Jensen on also to close out the show. She is not only the new head coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes, but I would think Caitlin Clark would tell you a huge influence on her from a recruiting standpoint and what she met during her 4 years at Iowa. Also of note, I don't know if it's a sad segment or not, but it's a reality segment. Mark Dykton, terrific idea yesterday in the backup quarterback draft. You have executed, courtesy of my Notre Dame hat right here. We have an order for our backup quarterback draft that we'll do coming up here around 7:35.
Yeah, so we thought, what better way to try to talk about this Colts backup quarterback situation than us actually have some skin in the game. So we're going to do a snake draft. I got the first overall pick. I did not pick that. That was Kevin, so there's no shenanigans. Kevin, then Jeff, then James.
And James wanted the snake. James wanted the end of round 1. James was the first name that I drew out of the hat. And James Boyd, you wanted picks 4 and 5.
Oh.
I did.
Chestnut checkers there from the crispy Dino Nuggets.
Watch and learn. Yes. People were telling me my Dino Nuggets were a little too well done. But look, man, I was not.
Those looked immaculate.
Boy, I'm not going to hate. Those look like Legacy. I thought you were bamming it.
Man, I was just thinking
run home and get those yesterday?
No, they're in my freezer, Jeff. This is not a bit. Did
you run home and make them after the show?
No, this was a thing, man. I had to get quick dinner done. But no, people were criticizing the Dino Nuggets. Like, man, you're gonna scrape the roof of your mouth with these things, and I'm like, relax. You guys criticize everything. I hate to see you're cooking.
All right, coming up in a moment, we'll get to the morning checkdown. All those things dead ahead on a busy morning. It's a Thursday here in Indianapolis, a little chillier than I would have liked, but I think we'll all live with that. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Brought to you by the Barbasol Horizon League Basketball Championships. March starts here at the Corteva Coliseum March 10th and 11th.
How about a good old backup quarterback draft? We'll do that coming up here in about 15 minutes as we are, about 72, 96 hours away from Colts business getting underway, NFL business, I should say, getting underway with free agency. It is time, though, for a morning check down, and tonight the Pacers will take their act on the road. It's a 7:30 tip down in the ATL. They are a slight favorite. For what it's worth, questionable Tyrese Halliburton, left hip flexor there. Benedict Mathurin's missed the last three. He has been upgraded to questionable. For tonight's James Boyd, your curiosity lies where as the Pacers take their act on the road?
One, is Tyrese Halliburton available? I think that's probably the biggest curiosity point. And then on top of that, will we see Benedict Mathurin return from his wrist / Achilles and ankle and stuff that he's dealing with as well? So the availability of two of the better players on the roster.
So again, they will go Atlanta tonight. They'll stay there, play the Hawks again on Saturday. It's a stretch of 6 of 7 on the road, and then huge ones next week with the Bucks. Cannot reiterate that enough. So 35-25, the Pacers now on the road. Jeff Rickard last night at Hinkle Fieldhouse, pretty par for the course with what we've seen from Butler this season. They hang around for a half against a team that is definitely on the bubble in Xavier, and they got blitzed really to start the second half. Couldn't make it really that big of a threat the rest of the way. I think Xavier had that lead at about double figures the rest of the night.
Just depth and top-tier talent. They hang, they play good, they play well, they execute, they hang around, but then at the end, it seems like rinse repeat, right? The last 8-10 minutes of the game, they're just going to start slowly falling behind. They'll give up one big run in that second half, and we've seen it again and again.
91-78 the final. Shout out to the Pike product, Ryan Conwell, transferred, of course, from Indiana State over to Sean Miller and Xavier. He had 21 last night. He had a dunk attempt that I thought might break Hinkle Fieldhouse if he threw that down there, but pretty impressive there from the lefty. James Boyd, Big Ten Women's Tournament underway last night. Today, you'll get Terry Moore and the Hoosiers. They take on Oregon. Do you think there's ever been a crowd that's been more 99-1 what it'll be inside of Gainbridge Fieldhouse?
I'm not sure. I'm sure it'll be a lot of IU fans, though, because, it was a lot of them, I felt like, for the men's game a few nights ago in Oregon.
Yeah.
So they travel well regardless, but you put them in their backyard, of course it's going to be, a little bit lopsided.
Storyline there, Sydney Parrish, the former Oregon product on the Hoosiers, of course. She was on with John earlier this week out of HSC, and these two teams pretty much right on the bubble right now, maybe on the right side of it, so important for both of them to get a neutral court win here. Big Ten Women's Tournament all weekend long. The men will be in town coming up next week. Guys, that's about all I have. I will throw a couple of rather wild, I think, NBA stats your way. The Cleveland Cavaliers last night won. That is now the third time this season they have had a win streak of at least 12 games. Like, you want to say, hey, are the Cavs for real or not? You drum up 3 different 12-game win streaks across a season, and we're only at, game 60-something? That, to me, is really impressive. And can you imagine at the start of the year saying, okay, at some point in this season, we will have a duo set an NBA record.
Yeah, this was insane.
Where each player hits 9 threes in a game. So 2 teammates, each of them hit 9 threes in a game. Could you imagine how far down the list you would have to go before you said, yeah, it's going to be Derek White and Peyton Pritchard?
I was going to say, if you're keeping with the Oregon theme, IU playing Oregon today in women's basketball, Peyton Pritchard, Oregon product. And it was...
And they said the Shellstad kid the other night was from Peyton Pritchard's high school, right?
Yeah,
I think they said that on the broadcast.
Loaded.
So what you're saying is they're like the boogeymen, basically.
Literally, pulled from the volleyball line.
Yeah, that was some incredible shot making. I think it just speaks to the skill level of the league today. And when you got 2 guys who, aren't your top guys. If you'd asked me, hey, 2 guys on the Boston Celtics are going to score 40 points in the same game, you say the Jays, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And
hell,
then
you throw Holiday in there probably. Porzingis if he was healthy randomly.
Yeah. So it's a little scary. But again, only counts as 1 win. So if you're a Pacers fan, you're like, hey, it only counts as 1 win. And speaking of Cleveland, the Pacers have 2 more against them to end the season. And
real late, right? In April.
It's the third last game of the season and the last game of the season at Cleveland. And so those could be big games. Cleveland already clinched the playoff spot. So it's crazy to see the turnaround.
two teams in the NBA that have already gone over 50 wins. We're about three-quarters of the way through the season. Cleveland with their 52nd last night, and Oklahoma City's got 51 in the West. Nobody else over 45 wins around the rest of the league.
Well, James, not to look ahead, Cleveland's up 8 games. Wouldn't that be rest time for them with the Pacers coming up that final week of the season? That could benefit the Pacers. You know, I know they don't get a scheduling break maybe next week with the Bucks, but could get that late in the season. Last note from me, it is a busy day from a mid-major standpoint here on the men's side of it. We'll see the Moval tournament littered with the Indiana teams playing. They've got to win 4 in 4 days. Indiana State, you've got Evansville, you got Valpo. And then in the Horizon League, we know IU Indy saw their season come to an end on Tuesday. But Fort Wayne will try to get it going here. They have got Youngstown State. If they win tonight, Fort Wayne will be at the Coliseum. We'll be up there Monday for their semifinal day and then their final day on Tuesday. So we'll see if any sort of mid-major from the state. Shout out to the Ball State women capturing the MAC. They've got a lot of local flavor on their roster. I've had a pretty good run here as of late. We'll see if they can then punch their ticket in the MAC tourney. All right, on the other side, nothing says let's get to the edge of your seat like a backup quarterback draft. Are we going 6-pack on? Because I would like to amend it. I don't want a 6-pack. I've got enough beer in the fridge.
Okay.
I would like, if I win, can one or all of you buy me a pack of Dunkaroos?
Sure.
I like this.
That's what I want.
How about
like
that's
this.
fine. Dealer's choice. You win, you get to pick what the other three have to buy you.
Okay. All right. I'm good on that.
Within reason, Mark.
Well, yeah, I'm not asking for a bottle of Blanton's from each of you.
You'll get Everclear and you'll like it, Mark.
James Boyd is going to get like the Costco-sized version of Dino Nugget.
No, he's going Red Berry Capri
So
Sun.
it is?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, I already told him. I was
Sun.
like, he wins. He's getting the 40-pack for me for the
Hey,
Capri
man,
Sun.
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling
3
good.
rounds of a backup quarterback mock draft for the Colts. Let's do it here. We'll do it next. This is the Fan Morning Show on a chilly, and yes, I swear I saw a flurry or two on this Thursday morning. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
You're listening to the Fan Morning Show on Sports Radio 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Good morning. Fantastic idea this morning, all driving in. And on the text chain, Kevin Bowen says, we need to have a backup Colts quarterback draft.
That was a Mark Dykton idea
Was
yesterday.
that a Dykton idea yesterday?
Yeah, I just confirmed it simply. I cannot take credit for that whatsoever. And
the beating heart of the show, Mark Dykton.
Not to get too personal here, but, I might have had a couple minutes there on the old bathroom break here during the break. And I was thinking to myself, instead of we've done this before. I think, Mark, I might have won it, right? Did I win the Colts head coach draft?
You did. You had Shane Steichen.
Don't think Jake Query has paid me for that.
No
shock there.
Is he not good for
reliability early in the morning? Let's just say.
Is Jake Query not a man of his word?
His brain is fuzzy.
Just not firing on all cylinders usually at this hour or
He
two.
might not remember that he was part of that in the morning.
That's probably a fair bet. What if we did? I don't know, nothing crazy here. We don't need to break the bank by any means, $5 to $10, whatever. But what if we gave a childhood nostalgic food item to the winner?
That works.
So it kind of has sentimental value to you. James Boyd eloquently has explained his love for Dino Nuggets, still at the age of 27. 29.
Yes, sir.
I've explained Dunkaroos here in the last couple of days. So, Jeff Rickard, Mark Dykton, James Boyd, you guys good with that?
Sure.
That sounds good.
I'm good with that.
I wanted Koala Yummies. They don't make those anymore. It's like Koala's March or something.
Well, we need to do homework. Let's not half-ass it. Let's just not go to the local grocery and think we're going to find something here. Yeah. If we need to do some digging, let's do some digging on this.
Give it the old college try.
I mean, we've got at least 4 or 5 days before an answer is going to come from this Colts backup quarterback draft. So how about you do some homework now, and either you buy it for yourself or you're going to buy it for one of us.
That works.
Right. I might have to go buy a sample of it and just bring it in just to kind of set the stage.
You don't have to tell me twice. Before the show started, again, our Colts backup quarterback draft. We'll go 3 rounds on this. Mark wrote out, very nice handwriting.
Don't make fun of me.
Our 4 names, took my hat, and we drew them out, and it is a snake draft. Now, it's a 3-round snake, so it is a little skewy, but James Boyd, you got the first pick, and you said, you know what? I'm going snake. I want the 4-5 slot. Your rationale behind the 4-5 slot, is that an indicator of how bleak number 1 and 2 might look on this list?
That's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, look, this isn't a regular fantasy draft where you're trying to go get the absolute best player. I mean, pretty much all of these backup quarterbacks I could see, not all of them, but there's a good number of them I could see coming to the Colts and being almost in the same tier is how I look at it.
It's either that or you pay a lot of money for a guy who doesn't just offer you quarterback competition, but no guarantee of long-term success, but probably will make some money on the open free agent market.
Mark, our draft order is what?
Goes me, Kevin, Jeff, and James.
Okay, and then we'll snake that here.
Uh-huh.
So you and Kevin did the drawing, and they are number 1 and number 2, JB.
No, James got
won.
the first pick.
Okay.
I won.
The first pick.
I got you.
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, there was
misunderstood.
none of that.
I
All
misunderstood.
integrity here.
No shenanigans.
In the DriveHealer.com studio. Mark, do we have some draftable music here?
Of course we do. Who do you think you're talking to right now?
Oh.
Okay. With the first overall pick, that sounds nice. In the backup quarterback draft, I will select.
Time out. Just when you say it out loud in the backup quarterback draft, it's kind of like, gosh, man.
Who does the NFL
Sports
send to
Kind
the
of like
podium?
walking out and seeing the snow in your car this morning, the
Who
flurries
does
in your
the
car.
NFL send to the podium for that pick, by the way?
That's a great question.
Spencer Rattler or something. With the first
The
overall
McCown
pick
brothers.
in the backup quarterback draft for the Colts, I will select Daniel Jones. Not necessarily that I want it, but I think it's the most likely scenario. Kevin?
Yeah, well, there goes my my top choice off the board here. Let's get crazy. Let's go Justin Fields. With pick number 2 here. Again, Pittsburgh has a decision to make. And these guys, you got to account for these guys having a decision to make. I'll be curious what the Fields market looks like. Because from an age standpoint, he certainly is still very much in his mid-20s. Does Pittsburgh opt for the 37-year-old Russell Wilson, or do they opt for Justin Fields? And again, do those guys say yes to whatever path Pittsburgh wants to take here? So I don't think it's super likely, but to me, he's too good of a player when you compare him to the others on the board to pass him up. So I'll go Justin Fields.
Okay, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields off the board, which means Jeff with the third overall pick. Who you got?
This is some wishful thinking as much for the show as anything else, and wishful thinking that he actually hits the market, which he may or may not. But tell me that Jameis Winston quotes wouldn't be great for this show early in the morning, KB.
I would love it.
That would be
I would
electric.
absolutely love it.
We would have to do try to get, Rick Carlisle's at 8 during the NBA season, maybe Jameis Winston at 8 during
my goodness.
Who needs to go to church on Sunday when you listen to Jameis?
Do a crab eating contest or something?
I could do it all.
I would absolutely do
Well,
it.
yeah, get him involved in the shrimp eating contest down at
yeah.
St. Elmo's.
I like that pick.
Yeah, me too. I was hoping that would stick around a little bit.
James Boyd, you're going to double dip right here.
I am going to double dip. I'm going to go Sam Darnold. Expensive,
Yeah.
but kind of a dream pick. And then
Is that the end of Anthony Richardson, though, if they bring him in?
I didn't say all that. I was just saying we get him in the building. I think that people are kind of overstating how good Sam Darnold might actually be. Having Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison changes things for you. And then to double up, I will go Marcus Mariota, who I think is actually a slept-on pick. Dual threat, not too old. Has been a backup before.
Competent.
Yep. There you
Been
go.
a high pick, if you want to play that game with Anthony Richardson. Hey, I can learn from this, et cetera, et cetera. Most recently in Washington, right? I almost said Philly.
Correct. Yep. Backed up Jaden Daniels.
Huh. All right, Jeff Rickard. So far, Mark, you want to update us as we are through 5 picks?
All right, so Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, and then James has doubled up with Sam Darnold and Marcus Mariota. It goes back to Jeff now.
All right, there's a couple of different ways you can go here, but I think I've decided on youth as much as anything. Limited competency, has had a rough go of it, was a very high pick. People thought a lot of him. It hasn't really panned out. How about Mac Jones?
Oh, okay.
26 years old.
Okay. Kevin?
Boys, it gets disgusting.
I was just going to
We
say.
started there.
I
Don't
was
you
just
think?
going to say.
Not? Oh, man. Dear Lord. I mean, I'm about ready to pick. Does Jim Sorgi have any eligibility left? I mean, what about Phillip Rivers' kid? I saw Notre Dame's going after Gunnar Rivers.
I got one in the chamber that I'm hoping you do not pick.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all do right now, don't we?
I got one in the chamber.
I'm going to go, I'm going to go Taylor Heineke.
Oh, damn you, Kevin. That was who I
He's
was.
won some games, Kevin.
He's won some games against this team. That might be a little bias. Is he 2-0 in his last two? Washington and Atlanta, right? Did he win each of those games? Why do I feel like he did it twice to the Colts? Boy, I did not expect to get cussed out here in round 2 of the backup quarterback draft. But man, Taylor Heineke did it. So there you go. Mark Dykton, you are on the board to round out.
So
round
my
number
final
2
two picks, you just stole one of them because I wanted Taylor Heineke to come back to me. This is the disgusting selection, but I'm going to take Zach Wilson as the backup quarterback, and then I'm going to double up and round out mine with kind of a rogue one. Could we have a reunion of sorts in Indianapolis? I'm just like Gardner Minshew, who is getting released.
That just
I thought
pained me.
Some
That
people
pained
had
me.
that, yeah.
That's Pro Bowl quarterback Gardner Minshew here.
There you go.
Do not disparage him.
Back to Kevin for your final pick.
I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, this is just. Should we have only done 2 rounds? I mean, do we really have to do a 3rd round with this?
I originally said 4. That would have been obscene.
Oh, yeah. I don't think we have any QBs left.
I thought about the high school quarterback, or the high school coach, I should say, Teddy Bridgewater. Didn't he join the Lions late in the year?
He did. He did. Is that your pick? Not a bad one, I don't think.
Let's go with Trey Lance.
Just talked yourself out of it.
I was like, what?
I mean, let's be honest. I don't really care at this point, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. You guys know how I feel about Band-Aids. I think it feels like I just jumped in a pool with a bunch of Band-Aids on. I just feel like they're that gross. Whatever. At least Trey Lance is a top 5 pick, and some might say, hey, he's never really had a true shot. Again, I don't believe any of that, but some might say it. So there's my 3. Justin Fields, Taylor Heineke, Trey Lance.
Jeff, for your 3rd and final.
All right, I wanted to think a little bit outside the box and maybe look at quarterbacks that could be available a little bit later on in the draft. You certainly don't want to go early, I don't think, and I don't think this guy will go early, but terrific year this past year in college. How about Tyler Shuck in the draft?
Oh, okay.
I thought I saw McShay, and I don't know, James, I think it was on Friday when you were at the Combine. Did you realize that was Tyler Shuck joining Todd McShay in front of us? Maggie from the Colts.
I did
the
see
great
her.
Intern.
Yeah, okay,
She
yeah,
brought him
yeah.
over. And
Everyone looks different without their helmet, honestly.
I know. Trust me, I had to double check it. And I think McShay is one that has Tyler Shuck above Shadur Sanders.
Wow.
Well,
Because I was curious. I'm like, wait, you don't see many prospects do like radio interviews during the draft? I'm like, what's going on here? And so, yeah, older Louisville quarterback.
I think 7 years in college, right?
Jeff, that would be what, round 2?
2 or 3?
Are you-
Do you think
are
he'd
you-
make it to 3?
Okay. Are you spending a day 2 pick on the backup quarterback?
I think if he's there in the 3rd round, I might, but not in the 2nd.
Okay.
Did Jeff
James.
break the rules?
I think he
I'm
kinda
just,
did.
I'm just making
What?
sure.
What does it have? Did it have to be
Free
free
agent
agents?
quarterback.
No.
okay.
Oh, you're looking
Jeff
for
did
a
not break the
backup
rules.
quarterback.
This is a backup quarterback by any means.
Okay. All right,
No,
easy.
no.
We'll give you a workout.
Jeff,
What does
come
that
on.
mean?
Jeff certainly adhering to the rules here. So.
All right. Okay.
Morning
James,
mark
you could
on Jeff
go
Crime.
Jackson Dart. You could go Quinn Ewers. You could go Will Howard. You could do whatever
I'll
you
go
want
Cam
here.
Ward. No,
That's a bold take.
Now we're getting a little
my,
finicky.
no. My final pick would be, and I say this tongue in cheek,
No, don't say it.
Don't do it.
The man that has property here in Boone County.
Jacoby Brissett.
Ooh, you went the other way.
Yeah, I thought you were.
I
was
thought you
on
were
Kevin's
going
wavelength.
Wentz.
No, I'm not that ridiculous. I mean, I
That's
want
where
to keep
you're
it in the
Now,
realm
I will
of
say this:
possibility.
if you get Jacoby Brissett, the Colts are going to get every 4th and inches. That man could QB sneak himself to the Hall of Fame.
Would he be a terrific influence, though, on Anthony Richardson? Is the question.
Yeah, I mean, terrific's probably too big of a compliment. I like Jacoby. He's a bit of an acquired taste. Tim and I definitely had a couple moments or two back in the day, but yeah, he'd be fine. Again, like I feel
See,
like
you're making KB sad.
Like I'm just disparaging all these guys whenever we bring them up. But to call Jacoby Brissett a terrific influence, that's a little bit, that sounds like
Just
something
in terms of
one of his parents would say. I feel like we make too much out of man, he's got his arm around this guy behind the scenes, and look how great of a backup he is, and he's such a great mentor and all that.
just trying to show a guy how to be professional is what I'm looking for.
All right, so let's recap this draft so we all know where we stand. This is for childhood snacks are on the line, apparently. I had the first overall pick. I went Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, Gardner Minshew. Kevin went Justin Fields, Taylor Heineke, Trey Lance. Jeff went Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, Tyler Shuck. And James went Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, and Jacoby Brissett.
There's your list.
And God almighty, if none of those are there. If the Colts don't take any of those guys, we're really in the weeds.
So who did we leave on the board? We left like Drew Lock on the board.
Yeah, Drew Lock.
We left
Jared Stidham.
Yeah,
Joe
is
Flacco.
Garoppolo going back to the Rams? Is that the thought process there?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Desmond Ritter's out there.
Anybody
Case
want to
Keenum.
Mason
G.
Rudolph it up?
I was going to say, is there anything left
Cooper
from
Rush.
Charlie
Yeah,
Whitehurst?
Cooper Rush.
Is he,
How
what
about
is he,
Pro-
40 years old
How
somewhere?
about Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley?
That's not a terrible idea, by the way. Tyler Huntley is a
Yeah, I
bad.
should have gone Huntley probably with my third pick. Now I think about it.
Desmond Ritter do anything for you? No.
No. he
Boy,
was
when
rough.
we did, I mean, this feels like girls debating if they should go to prom with Kevin Bowen. Like, I mean, this is such a pathetic exercise here of like trying to really get warm and fuzzies about this. But hell, this could be it coming up on Monday.
But the exercise demonstrates where they're at.
Certainly. And again, I don't think that, it would be, I don't know how I would feel if they came away with, let's just insert, who's the real, James went with Marcus Mariota. That was one I was like, okay, let's say they go a James Boyd, Marcus Mariota, and then Jeff, maybe not like Tyler Shuck, because I do think he could hear his name called relatively early on day 2. Like if they spend a round 4 pick, Quinn Ewers out of Texas, something like that, boy, that would be wild. Because for what it's worth, Joe Flacco and Sam Ehlinger are both free agents.
Right.
So right now, the only quarterback in the room not named Richardson is
Jason Bean.
Mr. Bean. So,
Interesting that neither of those two names were called with 12 selections.
Oh, not that interesting to me. I think you kind of have to.
yeah, I mean, Ellinger to me is just slotted as that third stringer at best.
But that's my point.
Yeah. And I just don't think Flacco wants to be here.
I don't think. I mean, Flacco might not be in the NFL.
Ooh, really? I thought Flacco still showed he could play.
People said that last year, and the only team that was interested in him was the Colts.
Yeah.
And I don't say that as a disrespectful thing. I mean, he's 40, and he had one real suitor last offseason after having a much better showing, I think, in those games in Cleveland than he had with the Colts. It nosedived kind of quick there. So I think we'll look at a very revamped quarterback room, and I think Jeff threw out a interesting proposition. Do you go and draft somebody? And, I mean, I don't necessarily hate the idea, but it does. If you do that, it's going to raise so many questions. Many questions.
Does it depend on which round you get a quarterback in before it raises a bunch of questions?
No, I think if you draft a quarterback, period, we're all going to be like, you have Anthony Richardson, why'd you draft a quarterback? And is he the future and not the guy that you picked number 4?
I almost could see them doing the veteran quarterback route and then drafting a quarterback as well.
Yeah, I would be okay with it, like, later.
I don't hate that.
I'm not as early as Jeff is, like a day 2. No, I wouldn't do that. But I've probably adopted a little bit my, like, draft thoughts on quarterback. I think in this day and age of the NFL, with how run-centric a lot of these guys are, and not just Richardson, there are plenty of guys that escape the pocket and I think, play the game of risk a little bit more. Depth of that position really, really matters. So, with the expanded practice squad, things like that, I'd be totally good with just whatever. Throw a random dart at a day 3 pick and, see if you strike gold once every 4 or 5 years on it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And a reminder, that was my final pick of the draft. I'm not suggesting they have so many needs. I don't think you go early rounds. But if somebody like that was available first thing Saturday, or maybe, why not?
I will say I'm not taking him over Shedeur Sanders. I don't care what any big board says. I mean, I have
McShay
eyes.
said that.
That's the Todd McShay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I have eyes, and I did watch some college football last season, and I get the Shedeur Sanders, potential red flags or whatever, but I'm like, the dude actually played football pretty well if you watched. So,
is the only real big red flag is that he's Deion's kid?
No,
I mean, I think it's arm talent. It's probably one of the biggest things, that just being real.
Yeah, I think people feel like he's too stationary. As crazy as that sounds, being Deion's kid, but not much of a creator. I think there were times that they felt like, whatever, from a processing standpoint, maybe not at the level that you would want at times. I thought Colorado's offensive line, though, was in shambles. So, getting away from, he's never been coached by anyone else besides his dad. I mean, I think that's a question no matter who.
A former NFL guy, though.
Well, but I don't think, I mean, that could be you. That could be your son, Jeff. I think you would have that. I mean, how many times have you seen an NFL draft prospect that has been coached only by his father? Never?
I don't think we've ever seen that.
Barely any?
I was going to say, though, to kind of give him some credit, if anybody has done it, they ain't made their son as good as his.
Well, sure, but still, it's just different.
It
it's
definitely
just
is different. Yeah.
I mean, you're going to walk into whatever, Pete Carroll with the Raiders or, Brian Dable with the Giants, whatever is going to happen, it's going to be a far, far cry. Mark will send that out on social media. Those are our backup quarterback draft. Pacers down in Atlanta tonight. That will be a 7:30 tip. Again, Halliburton questionable, left hip flexor for him. Benedict Mathurin has been upgraded to questionable, so a chance here to play his first game in a couple. Something we haven't discussed, and, I guess maybe let's say this. We are 2 weeks away from day 1 of the NCAA tournament, if you want to look at it in that light. I also think that means 2 weeks away from, if you look at the IU head coaching list, those guys in their seasons could be done 2 weeks from today. We haven't really discussed the job in a while. Any names you guys like? Last night I'm watching the Notre Dame game. Brad Stevens looking terrific in his Notre Dame gear. Watching his son. Big win for the Irish. Thank you to Cole Serta. 3 there late.
Like this.
Shout out to Micah Shrewsbury, Ryan Owens and company. Good win over Stanford. But anybody now, I mean, we have had, obviously, the Stevens, Dusty May stuff move to the side. It looks like a lot of these names on the list then will be playing in the NCAA tournament. Anybody intrigue you guys?
I think Chris Beard is a name I keep coming back to. Realistic targets, right? People you can come get.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Rabjohns, I think, said to us maybe not realistic, just based off
the legal stuff.
How much the Bloomington PD would have to be involved. But certainly as a basketball coach, hard to argue with what Chris Beard's done.
Any chance that you could wrest him away from St. John's if you look at Rick Pitino? Is that anything that anybody in Bloomington would even want?
I will say that man can coach.
Everywhere he goes.
He can coach. There's always a breadcrumbs
when you
afterwards.
talk about pure basketball coaches, yeah, I mean, Pitino, Beard, it's more, I don't know, it seems like Pitino, when he's answered the question, he's kind of resigned to the fact of, like, I love what I got going on here in New York.
Who wouldn't? Honestly, they're balling right now.
I mean, and he is a New York guy, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably say no. Anybody for you, James?
Mike Cronin, UCLA. I mean, No, it's not like the sexiest pick in the
Had
world.
success
but
down the road, knows the area.
I just feel like I don't know. It's always hard for me to kind of gauge because I didn't grow up in the era of IU being the powerhouse. So I know there's still looked at it as like a destination program. But for me, it's like, what's realistic, really? That's always the balance for me as someone who didn't grow up in it. And I haven't seen IU be at the peak of their powers, honestly, throughout this last, 15 years. So
I saw Jeff Borzell from ESPN. He mentioned Mick Cronin, big buyout, 8-figure buyout. He threw out Scott Drew. Obviously some ties to the state. Now, granted, Drew did turn down, Louisville and Kentucky last year. It's kind of wild. You look at Louisville, Kentucky searches last year. They had to go, I would say, decently far down the list before they found their respective guys. Now, by all accounts, they're having a great first season. The other name was TJ Alzelberger from Iowa State. Really, Iowa State's had, you look at the last couple of years, they've been right up there with any program, just pure wins. So, again, the level of attraction with those names, Buzz Williams, Greg McDermott, I don't know if it's necessarily winning. Brad Brownell, I don't know if it's winning, but the press conference, but we're about to, I think, because IU has won lately, I don't think maybe it's been as hot button topic as it was when the whole Mike Woodson drama played out in February, but that topic is about to resurface here rather quickly because obviously teams will have their season end here coming up 2 weeks from today.
See what you started, Mark? In the chat, we have Caleb Boggs going, you should do an IU head coach draft.
Ooh. We do need to do that. I already had that in the back.
That's
burner.
next week. Next
Okay.
Thursday. Yeah.
Well, my first pick, if I do end up with this pick, it's Mike Woodson.
Whoa, running it back.
Run it back. Get the tournament, win a couple games, win a game, and then, don't ride off into the sunset. Run it back.
I don't think people will be buying you beers in Bloomington.
No, I don't think
Might
they
be
would
throwing you beers.
Yeah, they be throwing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Not beers. They be throwing a lot of other things
James
that are probably
Boyd's been hit with a dino nugget.
Yeah.
I don't know, KB. It's been suggested that the best possible scenario for Indiana is to go on a late season run, win a game or two in the NCAA tournament, and then wave goodbye to Coach Woodson on the way out.
In all seriousness, that does seem like the best case scenario at this point. You cannot. No, not after you kind of stepped down middle of the season, gonna write it out, didn't talk about it, still haven't talked about it. I don't think this would be the best course of action to run it back, no matter how much success you have.
No, hell no. No, I've joked about it, but let me be clear. It's a joke.
No, it's over.
Yeah, this is done. Signed, sealed, and delivered.
I think that's all there is for Mike Woodson. Just try to have a nice finish to your little IU run here and then go about your business. That's the best possible scenario, I think.
I just want to see him drop like one more F-bomb about the refs before it's over. Perhaps after a win. Be like, yeah, they gave me a bleeping call or something like that.
He was animated the other night to say the
He
least.
was.
He's got nothing to lose. Just
That's
say
what I'm
whatever you
saying.
feel.
I'm like, you are playing with what they call house money. Like you're sitting. He's still gonna look at it as an IU legend, not from the coaching perspective, obviously, but as a player, he'll still be well respected. So I think if you can let a few things fly, it's okay. I remember on a tangent, like speaking of guys letting things fly, Rick Carlisle told us when they cut Tristan Thompson, or he got bought out to go to Chicago. He broke the news in the press conference. I was like, wow, this is the most just not fed up coach, but just I don't care anymore. And I think that's what Mike Woodson kind of adopt at this point in the season. We'll see.
He gave it the it was fun while it lasted clip, right, Mark? On the description of Tristan Thompson's Pacers tenure. IU, Ohio State, 3:45 coming up on Saturday. We talked about it a good amount yesterday. It is quite the bubble game. Again, not to nerd out too much, but do find it relevant. For Indiana, it would be a quad 2 home loss, which they don't have any of that on their resume. The thing
That's
about
what's helping them out.
The thing about the Indiana resume is they've got nothing ugly on it. So that's what you're trying to avoid. Whereas for Ohio State, a bubble team, that would be a quad 1 road win. Remember, they went at Mackey earlier this year. So you would be not only adding something to your resume if you were to lose that game for Indiana that would not be good, but you'd also be giving a bubble team something great for their resume. So cannot stress enough how important Saturday is inside of Assembly Hall. And tomorrow night, the Boilers will round out the regular season with Illinois. You guys see Maryland won at Michigan.
Got a win last night, yeah.
So
parity.
I believe, the Big Ten. I mean, again, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. You start this Big Ten tournament next week. Good luck picking the winner.
Ronnie Rice started going off from 3 in the second half is what held Maryland last night.
I think Purdue still has to win to secure the double bye. Not sure exactly how those tiebreakers play out, but I think that is still at stake for Purdue. Again, they've had this Fox 8 o'clock Friday nighter quite a few times here lately. So Purdue, Illinois tomorrow from Champaign, the house that James Boyd built.
Oh, I did not build that house unless it was built with bricks.
It's not good. All right, coming up in a moment, we will talk to the head coach for the Oregon women's basketball team taking on Indiana at noon today. We'll find out a little bit more about that as we continue on the Fan Morning Show with Kevin Bowen, James Boyd. I'm Jeff Rickard. It's 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to the Fan Morning Show on Sports Radio 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
An 8 o'clock hour on. A bit of an ugly start from a weather standpoint here on this Thursday morning. Chilly and a couple flurries in the air. Coming up, Scott Agnew is going to join us a little bit later. We'll have Jan Jensen, the Iowa women's head coach, certainly a huge influence on Caitlin Clark from the recruiting days back at Iowa City. Took over for Lisa Bluter this year. Iowa won last night. They'll play over at Gainbridge Fieldhouse tonight, and so will Kelly Graves, the head coach of the Oregon women. They've got Indiana coming up at noon, a big old bubble game for the women's tournament. Coach of the Oregon Ducks will join us here in a few. Guys, we're about less than a week away officially from the new league year starting, so when we do the show next Thursday morning, if the Colts haven't done anything, all of these guys will be on the open market. Offensively, the Colts free agents, again, we mentioned Flacco and Ellinger earlier, Trey Sermon, Ashton Doolan, Mo Alley Cox, Kylan Granson, Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, Danny Pinter. Offensively there, anybody
To keep?
you would look into?
Will Fries.
Yeah, that's the answer, I think.
It's got to be Will Fries. I would also seriously think about trying to bring back Ashton Doolan. Shouldn't cost too much.
Well, special teams action there.
Special teams action, reliable guy, great locker room guy, and also, not a horrible. I should honestly rephrase that. I feel like he's a pretty solid, break in case of emergency wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it.
Are the Colts willing to pay for Will Fries? Because, his name's popping up pretty high now that we've seen some guys go off the board. He's rising up the free agent ranks.
That's the thing that I've started to pay attention to a little bit more in the last couple of days, couple of weeks of Chris Ballard's words sound differently. And if he wants to say, hey, why should I change this year? I'd look in the mirror and say, wait, only 3 teams in the NFL currently have a longer playoff drought than us. That to me is the most humbling
And the
stat
names, I read your article yesterday, the names of those
all
teams tells you everything. Right?
Jets, Falcons, and Panthers.
Yeah.
But to Mark's point, you start to do the math. If you bring back Will Fries, we did the exercise yesterday. That's nearly half your cap if you want to project him at the number. So are they going to open up more cap space? How does that play out? James, could you see Mo Alley Cox back?
I could, honestly. And I know some Colts fans might be groaning when I say that, but it is within the context of you will add another tight end who's more of a receiver. Because I think Mo Alley Cox is a fine, backup tight end or second tight end, especially considering that he's a pretty good blocker. And he does make timely catches. So I think that he's kind of been put behind the 8 ball a bit with his role and him having to play out of his role because they don't have anybody else when it comes to the tight end. So I think that he's a solid guy to bring back, but he also has to want to come back. We talked to him at the end of the season. He said he wants to win, and that's the biggest thing about him. So I'm curious to see how he kind of explores his options in free agency.
It's Fan Morning Show.
Longest tenured Colts skill player, Mo Alley Cox.
Fan Morning Show, along with Kevin Bowen and James Boyd. I'm Jeff Rickard, and we welcome in our first guest of the day. The Big Ten Women's Basketball Tournament in town started last night. Later on today at noon, Oregon taking on Indiana, and the Oregon women's basketball coach Kelly Graves joins us now on the Payless Liquors hotline. Good morning, Coach. Welcome to Indianapolis. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, man. I just got back from my walk. My game day walk. You guys, it's cold out there, man.
A little different than the Northwest.
Was there a flurry or two still,
wind.
Coach?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
Was there a flurry or two still there? I could have sworn on my commute in, I thought I was seeing things when I saw the flurries.
Well, I didn't see any of that, but I'll tell you what, that wind is no joke, man. It cuts right through you, but a tradition is a tradition. I gotta do my game day walk regardless of the elements, right?
Well, Coach, I thought you might be out there recruiting some fans, too. This is probably not going to be the most neutral site atmosphere for you and the Ducks coming up at noon today.
Well, probably not. And that's okay. Actually, who can come today? It's a work day, right? And then it's 9 a.m. West Coast time. So there'll be people just getting up, drinking their coffee by the time we tip on the West Coast.
So, Coach Graves, I do want to start with this. I know your team, you kind of reloaded this season. Deja Kelly was one of the headlining pickups for this team. So what has it been like to go through this process of where your team was last year to now rebuilding with pretty much an entire new roster and seeing them come together and be in this position to obviously have some success this year?
Well, the last part's been, very rewarding. This has been a fun group to coach. It was kind of a reset. I guess welcome to the new age of of college athletics. But it is nice that you're able to do that. Yeah, we had a tough season last year, and we've been traditionally over the last 8 or 10 years one of the best programs in the country, and it was a setback. But we had a reset. You mentioned Asia Kelly. She's been playing really great, especially in the last month. But a huge pickup for us, just a lot of experienced guards, and I think that's kind of been the key this year. We've won a ton of close games, including the first time we played Indiana, and we did that because of our experience.
Coach, the first time you did play Indiana, you held them to 47 points. Since then, I think they're averaging more than 70 points per game. You guys have done a really nice job defensively. What kind of game do you expect at noon?
Well, and you mentioned they're playing really well. They're shooting the heck out of it, which really concerns you. And as a team, they spread you out. We're a little bit more traditional. We have a really tall, sometimes a mobile center. We go with a traditional power forward and 3 guards. But what they do is they run kind of a 4-guard offense, sometimes even 5. They spread you out and they negate our height advantage, and they can all shoot the 3. They have 5 different players that can get you 20 on any given night. We're not capable of that, so we got to play great defense. We got to really lock in and slow the game down as much as we can. So it'll be a real contrast of styles.
That's the voice of the Oregon women's coach, Kelly Graves. Kind of a bubble-licious game right now if you look at ESPN. On the right side of the bubble, Oregon, Indiana, but certainly hovering around it. Coming up noon today, Big Ten women's tournament over at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Coach, what was year 1 of the Big Ten like for you? Style-wise, travel-wise, logistically? How would you sum it up?
Well, I've been doing this for a long time. This is my 37th, 38th year of college coaching. I enjoyed it just because I got to go to new places. I'd never been to State College, Pennsylvania, or to the University of Michigan, never coached at Minnesota or Nebraska. So that part was pretty cool. The downside is this travel, man. It's no joke. I mean, we traveled more than any team in the country, 4 cross-country trips. And, kind of inhospitable weather. When you're on the road as much as we are, you want to get out and do things. But, I don't think it ever got above 0 when we were at the Nebraska-Minneapolis trip. And so you seem like you're in the hotel forever. And it can wear on you. We split every road trip, but we won the first game. And, the longer you're in a hotel, sometimes the worse it is. But I enjoyed it. I like the coaches in the conference. Obviously, the level of play is very good. Now, we were coming from the Pac-12 where, it had been the best conference in the country. So that wasn't much of a change, just the competition level. But, man, it's been fun. It's been a fun first year.
Last one from me, and last one before we let you go. But what's going to be like to face Sydney Parrish again in this game, and just seeing, I guess, the new age of college basketball, where you might have a player 1 year, then you look up and they've played 2 years somewhere else.
Yeah, and I've never taken it personal when kids leave your program. I really enjoyed Sydney the 2 years she was there. I think she had a good experience too. It was a tougher time on the West Coast. She was there during the COVID year, where on the West Coast it was completely shut down. We didn't have really an opportunity to build the kind of relationships we'd like to. But I'm excited for her. I'm excited for her success. I'm glad to see that she's now done. I don't have to play against her anymore because she is a really good player. But you guys, I enjoyed it. I like Indianapolis. I was here. My son played for Gonzaga, and I was here during their Final Four run a few years ago, and that's where I actually got COVID. Was here because nobody was wearing masks at that time. But no, I'm looking forward to this game, this tournament, and we've got something to play for. I like our chances to get in the tournament. I like Indiana's as well, but I think both of us feel like we might need just one more game to really solidify, our positions.
Winner will get USC coming up tomorrow. Again, Kelly Graves, the head coach of the Oregon women's basketball team, with us here on a game day. Coach, we'll end with this. The favorite thing from your walk this morning, outside of throwing on an extra layer or two, was what?
I saw a couple of ducks down there in that park on the
Look at that.
Oh,
Now,
man.
not the big blow-up duck, right? We saw that at Big Ten Media Day, right?
I was waiting. I was wondering if they were going to pull that out. They might next week for the men's tournament. We'll see. But, yeah, that was pretty genius, wasn't it?
Your athletic department knows what they're doing, I think, when it comes from a marketing standpoint.
They do. Yeah,
say
they
the
do.
least.
No question.
Well,
All
Coach,
right, fellas.
good luck. I know it's a busy morning. Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
That's Kelly Graves right there, the head coach of the Oregon women's basketball team. Again, Terry Moore and company. They've got IU coming up at noon, and if you look at the bracketology, both teams, as he kind of pointed out, right side of the bubble right now, but, teams 62, 63, and obviously that's nothing you want to flirt with here this time of year.
A duck, one of the rare animal sounds I don't have in my bank of NCAA tournament team.
Should I go Emmanuel duck?
I was going to say. Wow.
It's actually not too bad.
It wasn't bad, Kevin.
Thoughts?
You just attracted a mallard in the hallway.
Just don't do that around people with
Do
shotguns.
they need a mask? Did the mascot travel?
I don't know.
Puddles, is that the Oregon's
Yes,
mascot?
it had to.
I would think so.
I would assume.
Big Ten,
Oregon
NCAA
doesn't mess
headquarters
around,
are here.
No, they're for real.
Like there's
They have some financial backing at that school, too.
Just a
I
little
don't know
bit.
if you knew that.
They certainly do. So again, Big Ten Women's Tournament started yesterday, all weekend long here. And as we said yesterday's show, this is the last year for the foreseeable future that we'll double dip with both of them. We'll have the women's Big Ten tournament next year, but the men's tournament is not here. I think it's Chicago next year for the men. They come back here in 27, but then elsewhere after that. So women this week, men next week over at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. And I think IU Oregon right now, if you looked at the men's projected tournament, they would face off in the 8-9 game. So this is the new rivalry. Who needs Purdue when you've got Oregon?
That's right. You bring them into the conference, instant rivalry. And you talked about this earlier. Winner gets Juju Watkins and USC. There's an opportunity there, Kevin, if nothing else, right? Get a win
certainly.
today. Get an opportunity against USC.
What was it, a couple years ago? I'm trying to think. Did Indiana beat James? Did they beat Illinois? Was that it in the Big Ten tournament?
I mean, I would assume that they did because Illinois was not that good a few
But
years
I thought
ago.
Illinois was like a I'm trying to think if the year Illinois was a 1 seed. Am I imagining things here?
Women's basketball?
No, men.
Oh, I thought you were talking about women's basketball. Oh,
No,
okay.
no.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
IU
yes.
upset them.
Yes.
They won the 8-9 game, then they played the one on the neutral floor. And again,
Yeah, no, that actually did happen because I remember that's when I learned you probably
had like a
shouldn't
late
take
layup,
on.
right?
Yeah, I shouldn't take on all of Indiana on Twitter. That was not a good idea.
Oh, yeah, that was a
I
rough day. remember that
apologize
for you.
to those who remember when I was young and green and naive.
By the way, I read something on Robbie Hummel. Like, I swear every game I turn on, Robbie Hummel is doing this time of year. Do you guys want to hear the Robbie Hummel schedule for this week? Okay, so he did Purdue-Rutgers.
Makes sense.
On Tuesday night. So he drove. He lives in Chicago. Drove down, did the game, drives back. Flew to Minneapolis yesterday morning. Last night did Minnesota, Wisconsin. Flies to Iowa, Cedar Rapids this morning. He'll do Iowa, Michigan State tonight. He'll then fly back to Chicago tomorrow. Repack. Drive to Milwaukee. Saturday, he's got Marquette and St. John's. From there, he's flying to Newark to do Rutgers, Minnesota on Sunday. Are you still with me here?
I'm with you.
I'm just trying to keep up with packing.
Sunday, he flies from Newark to Asheville. He's doing the SoCon Conference title game for Westwood 1 on Monday night. Goes back to O'Hare then on Tuesday, and this might be the wildest day he has. He has a 6 a.m. flight from Asheville to O'Hare. He goes home, repacks again. He then flies at 8 p.m. So 6 a.m. flight back home. After he repacks, I assume he naps. 8 p.m. flight from O'Hare to Indy, and he'll do 3 Big Ten games next Wednesday.
He's going to be a tired man by the end of the tournament.
I didn't hear a morning show anywhere in that schedule, so I don't feel too bad for the guy.
Lots of dino nuggets, though, probably.
Can you imagine that grind?
A lot of prep time on the planes, KB.
And Robbie, it was a great piece, I think, in the Des Moines paper about like Hummel's schedule, and he makes it very clear. He's like, guys, I mean, I'm doing what I absolutely love, and how he has adopted it. He's like, if I'm going to get 7 months off, then you better believe I'm going hard for 5 months.
Respect.
I like it.
He said in total, I think it's 85 games he'll do this year.
Wow.
And said in that whole slate, like that whole week schedule I just rattled off, he was supposed to also do Purdue, Illinois tomorrow night, but like realized, all right, at some point I've got to have a little bit of a break here. So I enjoy Hummel a lot. But boy, you want to talk about absolute grind. But, down the road, could we be looking at Robbie Hummel as, I don't know if a Jay Billis type voice, but, could he be kind of the prominent college basketball analyst 10, 15 years down the road?
I think you see him doing a lot of games up until the Final Four. I really do.
Who is our Final Four color? Is it Grant Hill? Jay Wright? Is that where we're at?
That's what it looks like right now. No more Jim Nance.
Well, Ian Eagle, of course, is play-by-play. I'm trying to think who the color people are. Is that what it is? Is it Grant Hill and
I think it's
Jay Wright, or am I imagining
Unless
things?
I haven't seen a change if there has been one. Ian was on with JMV yesterday.
He was.
It was a really good conversation. Go to the website and check that out.
Those combos.
Yeah. It's good stuff. So a lot of Big Ten basketball to come, and it starts at noon today with IU and Oregon. As you said, the brand-new rivalry, really tough loss for Indiana at Oregon for the men the other day. And as you suggested, could be looking at another 8-9 game there, KB.
Yes, that is kind of the look ahead from a Big Ten tournament standpoint here for the men. Again, one more left this weekend. Indiana, Ohio State coming up on Saturday, and Purdue and Illinois tomorrow nights. With that, should we hit a morning check down?
Okay.
The Morning Checkdown, brought to you by the Barbasol Horizon League Basketball Championships. March starts here at the Corteva Coliseum, March 10th and 11th.
All right, tonight the ATL, a little bit of a later start for the Pacers, 7:30 tonight, 7:30 Saturday. They'll play the Hawks in each of these two games. Right now, Atlanta, pretty much going to be in the play-in range is what it looks like. Trae Young, and then they do have some length on the wings. Dyson Daniels certainly is a guy that I think will draw a Tyrese Halliburton type of assignment here. The number 1 overall pick, Zachariah Risa-Shea, if I'm saying that correctly there. Karis LeVert, they got in the DeAndre Hunter trade, so a little bit different for the Hawks than when these two teams met a month ago. But Benedict Mathurin, again, upgraded to questionable for tonight. Tyrese Halliburton, he is questionable. Left hip flexor there. Pacers a 2.5-point favorite against Quinn Snyder and the Hawks. Butler last night over at Hinkle, 91-78. Their home season comes to an end, and Jeff, it's been, I'd say, a pretty disappointing third year for Thad Matta.
It's been a really disappointing year for him. As we mentioned earlier in the show, it kind of follows the pattern, especially at home, right? You play a pretty good basketball team, you play them tough, you play them tight. Somewhere in the second half, you give up that big run. You never really quite get back into it. It's just, shortages at the back end of the roster, not having as many top-end guys. They're going to have a lot of retooling to do between now and next year.
Yeah, the big run came right out of half. That's what Xavier pretty much, I wouldn't say blew the game open, but they were up double figures pretty much for the rest of the game there. Shout out to Ryan Conwell, the Pike product, the Indiana State product. 21 for him last night. Xavier is a team flirting certainly right on that bubble there. So we'll see if Ryan Conwell, after getting the snub last year with Indiana State, if they can get in the dance. Butler will have one more. Creighton coming up this weekend at Creighton before Madison Square Garden. Again, speaking of the mid-major programs, it'll be a busy day in the MoVal tournament. You heard Matthew Graves on with JMV earlier this week. Indiana State, Evansville, Valpo, all in action. They all need to do 4 in 4 days to get it done there in Arch Madness. So quite the tall order there if we're going to have one of these mid-major programs from the state join, obviously, Purdue and potentially Indiana.
See crazier things happen.
The dance.
Right?
Yeah, Drake, by all accounts, sounds like the class of the Missouri Valley, and obviously we saw a great title game last year with them in Indiana State. By the way, Josh Schertz, did you see how he's doing in year one?
I haven't been paying close attention. Fill us in.
He was St. Louis for him. Don't think they're a tournament team by any means, but I thought they were like top 5 in their conference there. So, because the rumor was that he was like involved in the Louisville job last year.
St. Louis is going to be a tough place to win, though. So he needs to get it going. One of the things we talked about, women's basketball Big Ten tournament. We talked to Kelly Graves just a moment ago. Last night, you had Washington over Minnesota. Nebraska beat Rutgers. And Iowa, without Caitlin Clark, big win over Wisconsin last night, 81-54. Where are you at with we'll talk to their head coach a little bit later on, Kev, but that's tough to bounce back from losing Caitlin Clark.
How many times do you think she's been asked about Caitlin Clark in her life?
Probably too many.
Every time she talks to somebody.
It comes with it, though. I mean, she's the probably the greatest player ever in your school history. Not even probably, she is. And what she did for that program and the fame that they have is crazy. But I will say they've had some moments this year where they've looked pretty good.
Yeah, they beat USC the
so,
night.
Yeah,
of,
USC has
the day
2
of the,
losses. One of them was
Caitlin Clark jersey retirement game.
Yeah, so
Coaching AJ Guyton's daughter. We had AJ Guyton on earlier this year when Indiana and Purdue met up there. So Jan Jensen, the Iowa coach, join us here in a little bit. James Boyd, you were out on the town last night. You and Nate Atkins checking out Nate Atkins' favorite team. That would be the Cleveland Cavaliers. For the 3rd time this season, the Cavs have won 12 straight games. That's the second time in NBA history that's ever been done. That's one of the more impressive stats to me of like, sure, teams can get on a big winning streak, but to have 3 different iterations of it during one season, and we're only at game 61 or something.
yeah, it's really impressive to see how they've played. And obviously, like I said earlier in the first hour, the Pacers have 2 more games against them, which at that point is Cleveland playing their starters at the last games of the season? Could it be a seeding thing for the Pacers? But I definitely think that it could be a measuring stick as well to kind of see where you're at before things get serious and get for real. But I think they're a very serious team. Darius Garland from Indiana, from Gary, Indiana, know him pretty well and his family. He's back healthy again. They're playing well. And so I think, to me, just being honest, it's Boston and Cleveland at the top of the conference, and then they're in their own tier, and then the Pacers and everyone else kind of slots in behind them. But, again, I think the Pacers are out to prove that last year wasn't a fluke.
On the other side, where does Shane Steichen feel like he needs to improve here coming up in year 3? We'll talk about that. This is the Fan Morning Show. Kevin Bowe and Jeff Ricker, James Boyd, Mark Dykton on a Thursday.
You're listening to the Fan Morning Show on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We'll certainly podcast our backup quarterback mock draft. It might make you cry. Maybe it'll make you laugh. Who knows? But
Hopefully laugh.
It is a dose of reality that the Colts will certainly play out here over the next handful of days. Nothing like Pro Bowl quarterback entering the mix yesterday. That would be one Gardner Minshew cut by the Raiders. The Raiders have two quarterbacks on the roster, Aiden O'Connell and Gus Bradley's kid.
How do you feel about Gardner Minshew if he came back to the Colts?
The definition of a Band-Aid.
But that's what you're talking about if you're talking about competition,
I mean, one of you
right?
picked him, right?
I did.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
My
sure.
golden boy.
Sure.
My dark horse.
I will say he flipped that one season in Indianapolis into a nice payday. He definitely did that.
$15 million, right?
Got about $15 million guaranteed, I believe. It was like a $25 million deal. And he gets another $3 guaranteed, I think, this year before he has to move on. So he got paid. But I'll throw this out there. When it comes to the Colts and their options, if he is the one that's picked or someone of that caliber, I mean, at that point, I think it was just all a smokescreen.
Well, and this is where I have such an issue with the Band-Aid quarterbacks. It's because life in the AFC exposes you. You can do the Band-Aid thing in the NFC, and you can skate by. You can't do that in this conference. This conference, you'll get chewed up and spit out.
Every week you're up against somebody.
It's wearing a Band-Aid jumping into the pool. I mean, that thing's coming off immediately. That thing's not working. I mean, look at the AFC. If you did an exercise of rank the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL, and you did from both conferences, of course, and you'd have what, 11, 12 from the AFC? So you just can't play that game. You can make, Sam Darnold, you can have your little year in Minnesota. You come back to the big boys in the AFC, and it's not going to work out for you. So I think that is something to keep in mind. And, I think the Raiders, they're kind of backed into a corner, but they certainly felt that last season with Minshew.
Well, it's hard to pin him down when we were talking to Chris Ballard, but what does it mean in his mind that you're creating competition for Anthony Richardson? Are you truly bringing somebody in that's going to compete with him and say, okay, if I win this job, I'm going to be the quarterback for the next 5 years? Because that guy doesn't appear to be on the open market. Or are you really just trying to send the message to Anthony Richardson like, hey, you had a rough year, all these things happened, just so you know you better bring your A-plus game back or there will be competition?
It's a weird way to look at it. I look at it like this, Jeff. This cannot be a serious competition, mainly because of what you invested in him being the number 4 pick. He is the highest drafted quarterback since Andrew Luck. That matters. And I think you're married to that decision. You can try to, build like an off-ramp, I guess, if he doesn't work out and say, we cracked the door open to possibly move on from him, or we told you at the beginning it was an open competition, whatever the case may be. I don't know, if this regime would deserve another chance to draft a quarterback to start over if they got it so wrong with Anthony. I think the biggest thing, the most alarming thing is what I've talked to you all about. Injuries is one thing, inaccuracy is another, but the fact that you had to bench the guy because he wasn't paying attention or wasn't locked in enough is alarming, especially after you told us leading up to his second season that he was this leader. He was this hard worker. I'm like, well, which one is it? And so I think right now Colts fans are struggling to have trust in the front office because it's like everything you all have said so far hasn't really panned out any way that you envisioned. And so it's a tough situation to be in for sure. But I do think, if anything, it's now or never. So I guess it makes for a very pressurized season in my eyes, especially for Anthony Richardson.
I know we played a lot of Chris Ballard audio exiting last week, and again, the offseason is time, to hear from the GM. I do think Shane Steichen had a couple clips that I want to get to, right here, one of them, and then at some point a little bit down the road. But James, at his, podium session at the Combine, they also do kind of a little spillover session afterwards. And in a Shane Steichen bar, I actually thought he gave a little bit into like where he needs to improve as a head coach away from the X's and O's coming up this offseason. Again, I can't stress enough, Shane Steichen bar. Like, this is not some, public speaker here that all of a sudden everyone is paying thousands of dollars to listen to. Shane Steichen is obviously very close to the vest when it comes to anything from a revealing standpoint. But this was Shane Steichen at the Combine about where he needs to improve as a head coach coming up in year 3.
Yeah, for me to say that right now, I think just there were some things that happened throughout the season. You know what I mean? Obviously, with some of the things that went on that you guys know about that I'm not going to bring up again. But obviously, you learn from those, and so it's like, shoot, for me as a leader, just setting the standard even more clear. You know what I mean? It's reiterating the standard over and over again, and not saying it at the start of training camp and saying it at the start of the season, but it's a reminder, hey, every 2 weeks of this is the standard and this is how we operate.
Again, not earth-shattering to, I think, a lot of people, but in Shane Steichen lingo, James Boyd actually thought he said something he had never really said in that answer about his need to reiterate the standard. And I think some of that can get lost when you keep the plate as full as he's kept it. When you've got all the things on the plate, you've got the quarterback on your plate, you've got the play calling on your plate, you've got the head coach title on your plate, not repeating the standard or not drilling that, ingraining that, overemphasizing it, that can slip up. And Shane there, I think, admits that he did a poor job of it. Should have said it, a few times. Because Shane Steichen is wired in a way, James, and you know this full well. That man, his memory is insane. He remembers every football play that has ever happened. So when a coach were to tell Shane Steichen on day 1 of training camp, this is the standard, Shane Steichen's probably going to remember that forever. But the 53 personalities in your locker room are not you. So I think you've got to remember that as a head coach. I thought, again, in Shane Steichen's world, I actually thought he said something there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I feel like when you talk to Shane, you really have to, one, try to pull some responses out of him, and then you end up analyzing whatever few words you get. And I think he admitted there that, okay, maybe I didn't lead this group of men the way I intended to. And I think a lot of it just comes down to messaging. And perhaps not to us, because remember, in the players' survey or the NFLPA report card, he received an A from the players. They're lockstep in with this guy. The majority of them do like him, not whether it's the report card or me just talking to the players in general. Most of them, if not all, have a ton of respect for Shane Steichen, and I've heard from many players that he is very personable and ask about their families and stuff that they have away from football. But I think when in the tough moments, he has to be better from a speaking standpoint, not only to hold the team accountable, but to, I guess, speak with some authority. And to me, that's where he kind of lacked last year. Obviously, the benching was weird. You benched the guy for 2 weeks. We ask, hey, is he a part of the future? Is he going to play here ever again? And you say, I don't know if he's going to start here anymore. I can't see the future. And then 2 weeks later, oh yeah, he's a franchise quarterback. What? No one's going to believe that. And so I think you don't have to tell everything. Obviously, I would love that as a reporter, Jeff. Getting scoops is fun, but it's more efficient if you just tell me what's going on instead of having to go through back channels, and then vice versa. I think that he has to remember that you're not just speaking as the head coach of a football team anymore. You're the most front-facing position of a billion-dollar corporation outside of the starting quarterback of your team. So if he's got to grow up, I think that you have to already be there. It can't be both of you trying to grow up together.
Two things. First of all, I thought it was terrific that he had that much self-reflection just a couple of months coming off that season. And secondly, what he tells us, what he says to us during that whole benching period, it's really what the messaging directly was to Anthony Richardson that's going to matter long-term, don't you think?
Well, I think that was an issue too. I mean, James, you were in the same scrum I was. When Anthony Richardson was asked why he got benched, he shrugged his shoulders. That can't happen. I mean, again, your public messaging, yeah, I'm with James. Selfishly, I'd love it to be transparent as hell. I'd love it to be, a public hard knocks, if you will, and everything's out in the open and you're super transparent. I understand, to a degree, why some coaches, Shane Steichen being maybe the poster child of it, they don't want to be that. But when you're if that is true, Anthony Richardson doesn't know why he was benched, then what are we doing here? So that's where, and again, in another way, Shane's clip that we just played right there, he is saying my messaging behind the scenes needed to be better. We would love it to be transparent like no other publicly, but some, like Belichick, Belichick is certainly that, he was never that publicly. But behind the scenes, you better be clear, you better be direct, you better make sure that, again, those 53, they know what hymnal you're singing from. And when they don't, which Kenny Moore saying, hey, guys aren't practicing to the level that we need to. DeForest Buckner, we got too much ego, etc. Like, clearly there was issues outside of just Shane's poor messaging. There was issues behind the scenes as well. That's where I think it's a look in the mirror moment for him. And I don't know if we'll get time to play it today, but he was very adamant that he will continue to call plays. And we've seen young head coaches as their head coaching careers, Nick Sirianni being the most recent example of it, as they reach certain levels of being a head coach, they say, oh boy, that's a whole lot on my plate. I'm not going to do that anymore. Shane's not doing that. He is very adamant that he will continue to call plays. So it's a very full play. And knowing how Shane's wired, that doesn't surprise me. Like, I don't know, control freak, I feel like is kind of a negative connotation, James, but I can see why he wants to be in full control as he can be as a head coach.
He's meticulous.
Yes, that's a much better way to put it than I did.
And hey, my mom, had the dictionary open for me as a kid. And whenever I know
Shout
words.
out to Colleen Bowen. Come on, where's the dictionary?
There you go. Shout out to Lorna Boyd. But to your point, Kevin, I think with Shane, the messaging has to be better. And then also just have some conviction in what you're saying. Because sometimes I think the message can be lost if it's just not strong enough overall. And so we'll see how he adjusts to that. And again, I can't really say, oh, you should give up play calling because none of us were saying that after the first season. So I'll give him some grace there.
I asked the question simply just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I know. I was just making that clear for the listeners. Like, hey, you're not saying, oh, change this. He's good at that. It's just that, to your point, when you do start to struggle and even if you start to elevate, you realize, okay, maybe there has to be some difference here in what I'm doing and just the grand scheme of things, because I would love to know, seriously, what is the life of a head coach in the NFL and what's different about it other than, you having perhaps more production meetings and things like that when it comes to, oh, we got this crew coming to town. I got to meet with them on Friday to talk about the game. What is it really like, just day-to-day tasks beyond just calling the plays and X's and O's?
All right, coming up in just a moment, we will turn our attention back to the Pacers on the road. They'll be taking on Atlanta tonight. What's at stake? What happened last night that could impact them? Who's going to be available? All those questions and more as we continue on the Fan Morning Show with Kevin Bowen, James Boyd. I'm Jeff Rickard, Mark Dykton on the ones and twos. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to the Fan Morning Show on Sports Radio 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Pacers on the road for 6 of 7. 2 guys questionable for tonight. We'll get to that as they're down in Atlanta. Slight favorite over the Hawks. Earlier in the show, we talked about a week from today will be the first full day of the new league year, meaning if you don't re-sign your free agents, they are free to go wherever. We listed some of the offensive names. Defensively, guys, Dayo Dangbo, EJ Speed, Julian Blackman, Grant Stewart, Taven Bryan. Can I entice you with any of them?
Let me ask you guys this, because I've always been a fan of Julian Blackman. I know he's had the injury history and hasn't always lived up to what he's been, but I just feel like if he's healthy and right, that's just he could be a really productive player. Now, it's got to be at the right price, but where are you guys at on Julian Blackman?
Here's the thing, and love Julian. I think that he's a very good player when he's healthy, but he just isn't healthy enough.
Yeah,
he gets hurt every year. If he's
healthy and right, Jeff, you almost just kind of walked yourself into the
right. But what's the price tag?
Into the counter.
For him
No.
because of
I
that,
think that's
though?
what makes it difficult.
I think he's honestly going to be pretty cheap for any team. I don't know if I would give him a multi-year deal. I know it's what he'd probably chasing after last year. I would. I mean, similar to last year. What he signed for? I think it was like one for maybe 3.7, something like that. It wasn't a very high number.
Well, it was an April re-signed too, James. Remember how weird the safety market was last year?
Yeah, I think he probably wanted to wait it out and see if he could, get more suitors and bigger interest. But, again, I'm not opposed to bringing Julian Blackman back, if he's at a discounted rate. However, I don't think that you can trust him to be your starting free safety, mainly because of the injury history. And I'll give him a lot of credit. Hell of a player, hell of a teammate. He told us after the season, we all kind of knew, we were talking about it, Kevin, that wasn't the player that we saw in camp. And then it turns out he had tore his labrum in his shoulder and then played through for the rest of the season. He was very candid about it. And I asked him, I'm like, man, why'd you do this? And, you could have got the surgery and got healthy. And he's like, one, I think he wanted to play going into free agency, but two, he said he wanted to be out there for a teammate. So I respect that a ton. It's just that in this business, it can be cutthroat. And one of the cutthroat decisions is like, okay, he's a great guy, but doesn't stay healthy.
And Dayo, you talked about yesterday.
Well, one more note on Blackman. I think James said it pretty well right there. How do you view last season? You obviously commend him like none other for playing through the injury, but you can't ignore the injury.
Mm-hmm.
Given the back of the baseball card for him. I really like Julian Blackman as a player, but I can't ignore that. And safety, by all accounts this year, it is much deeper. A variety of ages as well. Corner, I think, would go into that. Remember, we didn't have a single defensive player franchise tagged by any team in the NFL. So unless these re-signings occur, like, for example, Zach Bond re-signed with the Eagles yesterday, unless those happen over the next handful of days, you will have, all of those free agents hit the open markets. Do you guys see Joey Bosa cut late last night by the Chargers?
Yeah, salary cap casualty. He's only 29.
Boy, that dude has been a shell of himself these last couple of years.
I was going to say, I wasn't that surprised. I think it's one of those things where his name recognition to, like, the general fan is like, oh, my gosh, go pick him up. I can't believe they cut him. Trust me, they probably moved on for a reason. And then you look at the injuries over the last few seasons. Appeared in 14 games last year, so he missed 3. The year before that, 2023, 9 games played. Year before that, 2022, 5 games played. So, even though he was a Pro Bowler last year, there are some, injury concerns. He's aging, and I don't think you get better with age. And I mean, to me, it was similar to, not to this level, but when Shaq Leonard got released or waived by the Colts, a lot of the general fans were like, oh my gosh, go pick him up. And the framing around him was like, oh, all pro linebackers on the market. Well, he's on the market because he is no longer that player. And so I think that's probably similar to the case with Joey Bosa here.
Yeah, I'll be curious. We talked a little bit about Dayo Dangbo yesterday. I think, the NFL clearly thinks pretty highly of Dayo based off some of these reports. I tend to think his durability and the fact that he is still only 25. I can see why there are NFL teams out there that want to give him a chance. I think Mike Chappell has made this comp before of like, this is kind of the free agent Chris Ballard would go after. Like Danico Autry, think back to that, whatever that was, probably 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But I guess I'm curious over the next week, how does competition get defined? That was the buzzword Chris Ballard used numerously at the season-ending press conference. I didn't provide enough competition. He said it once, he said it 1,000 times. Well, to provide competition, that's what multiple people battling out for a starting job, is it not?
For a starting job, that's where you want your competition.
Now, that gets pricey quick, and that's where some of these things I think are difficult for me to play the math game of like, okay, a re-sign of Will Fries, okay, if you don't re-sign Dio, that means you're probably going out and you're getting defensive lineman. Okay, does that defensive lineman just walk in here and get a starting job? Let's play out linebacker. If EJ Speed walks, does the linebacker just come in here and get the starting job, or is it, do you view him and Jalen Carlisle battling it out? So that's where, as I feel like the deadline has crept closer, I can sit here and confidently say Chris Ballard's words are different, but how it exactly plays out, I'm still pretty confused by. I still don't know how the $35 million in cap space is about to be divvied up and how much the significant change is going to occur. We can play the clips if you need evidence. The words of Chris Ballard are certainly different, but financially, they're going to have to operate in a much different manner than they usually operate if they're really going to create an abundance of competition.
239-1070 is the number to call very quickly before we end the hour here. Dave is on the line here on the Payless Liquors hotline. And
Good morning.
Dave, I'm just curious, you have some thoughts on Colts free agents.
Well, I think there's, 12 or 13, Kevin?
It sounds right. Yeah, I think it's about 6 starters hitting free agency.
Sports Illustrated did an article yesterday listing the top 50 free agents available in the NFL right now. The Colts had 2 players in the top 50. You want to venture a guess on who they were?
Fries and Adangbo?
Fries and Kelly. Kelly was 37, Fries was 41, and Dale was not on the top 50.
Well, I would just think that's wrong. I think Ryan Kelly is the biggest name on the Colts free agency list, but I would rank him probably Dio, Will Fries, and then Ryan Kelly. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Dave.
Okay, why would you overpay somebody that only put 3 pressures per game on a quarterback? 3 pressures, not sacks, not hits, 3 pressures.
And Kevin, you talked about you talked about the age and upside, right?
Yeah. So this is what Dave say? The NFL list.
Yes.
Sports Illustrated got it.
Sports Illustrated top 50 free agents.
Got it. To each their own. You look at NFL.com. Boom, Dio's 35, Kelly's 68. You could probably go around and around on this. For Dio, it is certainly he did not have a good contract year. I don't want to act like it was earth-shattering, but when you compare his numbers to Kwity Paye from a snap standpoint, you can make the case Dio's had more production than Kwity over the course of 4 years. He also hasn't missed a game in 3 years. I mean, look at that room right now. Kwitty's had some injuries. Samson Ebukam is 30 years old, coming off a torn Achilles.
Yeah.
Do you really want Latu all of a sudden playing a ton more snaps? I thought Latu hit a wall with 5 games to go in the season. I still would like to keep him in more of a pass rushing role. So, again, all of Dave, I don't want to totally discredit Dave's points. This is what makes it difficult, because how do you juggle all of this? And again, a 25-year-old defensive lineman who's versatile, who hasn't missed a game in 3 years, who had the torn Achilles coming out of college, so you pretty much chalk up his first year as a redshirt year. I don't think you totally just say, hey, go walk out the door. And if you're doing that, again, where's the competition? Where is that definition of it? So
yeah, and I think to your point, Kevin, you have to spend money somewhere. I think sometimes I can even myself go a little overboard with okay, what are the cost-saving measures for a team? But it's at the end of the day, you do have to spend money to have a good team. It's just where you spend it. And assuming that you perhaps save some money if you cut Braden Smith, does that open things up to kind of pursue Dio Dangbo? Because I do think that Dio will have a robust market even after that down year. I know Tom Pelissero had it a few days ago. Dio is one of 6 players over the last 2 seasons with 30-plus QB hits and fewer than 20 starts. So he's a guy who can definitely, get the job done.
All right, coming up in just a moment here on the Fan Morning Show, one of the folks that is responsible for some of the most important development of Caitlin Clark stops by. We're going to talk to Scott Agnes. We're going to do that later on in the show. Sorry about it. Thank you very much, Mark. Scott Agnes is going to tell us about Pacers. That was my first turnover of the day. All right, well, I'll take that one. But we will also do that as well. So we got a big hour coming up for you here as we continue on the Fan Morning Show on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to the Fan Morning Show on Sports Radio 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
All right, 9 o'clock hour. Here on a Thursday, Pacers down in Atlanta tonight, questionable. Benedict Mathurin, he's missed 3 games, so we'll see if he returns to action tonight. And Tyrese Halliburton, who, I don't know, maybe Scott Agnes has a number on this. Scott Agnes Fieldhouse Files joins us. Scott, I feel like Halliburton's been questionable like a handful of times this year, and he's played pretty much every time. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're exactly right. And the notable thing is the last time this happened, when he was more doubtful, remember, he ended up having one of his best performances after saying he was staying at home and playing video games all day, not expecting to play. So this left hip flexor is definitely something new and notable, though.
Scott, I want to talk more about Tyrese Halliburton. We've talked a lot collectively about just the impressive run that he has been on coming out of the All-Star break. But it's still mind-blowing what he's doing with his assist-to-turnover ratio. Historically, he's on a run that is some of the all-time greatest numbers in NBA history. Try to put this into perspective for us.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he went 14 straight games with single-digit assists. And then now I think it's 5 in a row where he's averaging, or where he's had at least 10 in every one of those games. And then, as you referenced, Jeff, to top it all off, he's averaging 1 turnover per game. So he's really setting all kinds of records because of that, and gotten back to the level of play, I think, from the offensive standpoint that we saw last year. And then that kind of dissipated and went away because of injuries, and then kind of the same thing here. But the fact that he's able to have so much offensive success and have such a high usage rate and have so few turnovers, that's your point, is the thing that's really been astounding. And then I would throw in there defensively, the fact that now he's good for about a couple of steals per game has really helped too.
So, Scott, did you teach Tyrese any defensive slides over the summer? Do you take credit for this transformation that we've seen?
No. I take zero credit for anything that he's been able to do. No, it's been fun, James, as you know, just to see him back kind of himself again.
Yeah.
It felt like he was going through just a lot, both physically and mentally, and it finally feels like there's this big weight that's been lifted off his shoulder over the last several weeks, and I think it's as simple as rest being the number one thing, health being the second thing, and then probably having almost your full cast of teammates out there, and everybody starring in their own role, playing a key part in him being able to, be himself once more.
Yeah, I was going to follow up real quick there. I know Aaron Nesmith had a huge game the other night, and he looks about as healthy as he's been all season as well. How have you seen him kind of get his legs under him after going through some ups and downs as far as the injury bug?
Yeah, his thing was tough because it was a foot injury that was much more than I think they could even share or lead on. I mean, he stepped on Willie Green's foot down in New Orleans back on November 1st, and they thought he would be back a couple different times, but ultimately, and I think they made clearly the right approach, was let's be ultra conservative here, let's be extra safe. The last thing you want is for him to come back and play 3 games and then miss another month or something like that. And so he really had to work his way up from nothing again, too, because, he played for less than a week or two and then was out and then was basically out for 2+ months. And so he was playing way behind everybody else from game rhythm, game shape. Good thing was the entire roster was basically the same, so he didn't have to adapt to that. And then now you just see him being that steady hand, that defender, the guy willing to do anything without having to say very much every single night, and every team needs a couple of those. So he's been fantastic. You're right.
You know that voice? It's Scott Agnes, Fieldhouse Files, where you can find his work. Scott, I consider myself a loser at times.
Harsh.
I don't think don't talk about my friend like that.
Well, I guess I'm talking about
we'll
myself.
Fight you on behalf of Kevin Bowen.
Well, I say this, and Scott, take this as a compliment, please. I feel like at times Scott finds stories that I'm like, man, how the hell did he find that? And I just find myself just locked in on it, and I'm thinking to myself, should I care this much? So, like, Scott and I feel like, are kind of like side by side on this, of like, we care about just like randomish sports stuff, I guess. So, Scott, I apologize for bringing you into this, but here I am doing it. I say all of that nonsense to say this. You were in the building at Gainbridge Fieldhouse last night, for the Big Ten women's tournament. How different is like the general setup, in your opinion, for like a college basketball game in that arena versus an NBA game? And I apologize if only you or I care about that.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. I care about the most little details like that and how it operates and whatever. And you're right. Here's where you'll appreciate the most, although it's kind of in a negative way, is the media seating in that setup is way different. They have kind of all media put up in the north, let's call it end zone, north end there. And remember how it was so sweet, especially for the women's tournament, how there were media seating, courtside. You'd sit right behind the bench and listen into everything.
I sat courtside at the Indiana Daily Student for the Big Ten tournament when, sadly, Verdell Jones tore his ACL right in front of me. I remember in 2012.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's basically no more unless you're a TV partner or something like that. And there's a lot more space. They're not filling every little space and area with as many seats as they can. Obviously, if the open space for the band, but they try to even keep media on a different level than everything. You're really not on the event level much anymore because the central hub for us is the Fever practice court, which is on level 2. So that's notable. Here's the number one thing I took away from yesterday, KB, is the fact that we are so used to going in there, even in the summer, and watching that place filled, especially when Caitlin was there. And, of course, Caitlin was there last night watching the University of Iowa, but it felt so weird because given it was a Wednesday, the opening day for the Big Ten tournament, it was just quiet, dead, empty. And we've been fortunate that we have not seen a lot of that here in this town over the last year.
Scott Agnes on the Payless Liquors hotline from Fieldhouse Files. Get back to Pacers for a second. They're in this really tight race for the 4th spot as far as Eastern Conference playoff positioning with the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee's won 8 of 10. The Pacers have played well, especially out of the All-Star break, but they find themselves a half game behind Milwaukee with 2 head-to-heads coming up within the next week and 1 day with the Bucks. How important, and ironically, whoever gets the 4th spot would host the other team in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. How do you see these teams matching up right now?
Yeah, those are significant coming up because Milwaukee took each of the first 2 games of that series, and now they're a little bit different, obviously, because they tweaked the roster with the trade deadline, and I think you're starting to see that team really come together and play well, and a team you don't want to face come the playoffs, and you'd certainly like some home court advantage. So that will be a good test here in a couple weeks. I think they did the right thing of moving off of Chris Middleton. That was kind of weighing him down, only because injuries has kind of derailed the rest of his career. And he wasn't the player that they could count on in previous years. But it starts at the top, and Jeff, I say this all the time, in a playoff series, you want to have at least the best player in that series, and it's hard to look across the way and you see Dame and you see Giannis, who didn't play last year, and then I think that's obviously the big advantage for them. And then they've added some pieces, some 3-point shooting and such that would make it very difficult. That's not a team I would want to face. If anything, I wonder, do you want to be the 6th seed here if you're not that 4th seed? But in reality, what you want to do is avoid Boston Celtics as long as you can because we know exactly what they are.
I enjoy stupid sports stuff. Scott Agnes enjoys stupid sports stuff, and I think he has great work.
Don't we all?
Up on Fieldhouse. Sure.
I think we do.
Let's all come together. Kumbaya here on this Thursday morning. Scott, as always, man, thank you for the time.
Of course. Thanks, guys.
That's Scott Agnes right there, Payless Liquors Hotline. Mentioned this to kind of lead off the show, but I want to go back to it. You just brought up the Milwaukee 2 games next week, Tuesday and Saturday, with the Pacers. Here on Tuesday, actually, it's the only home game during the 7-game road stretch for the Pacers. The Pacers will be traveling on a back-to-back the night before both of those Bucks games, and the Bucks will not be for either of them. So if you want to talk about a bad travel luck with this, the Pacers have that next week. And I don't know how revealing Rick Carlisle will be when he joins us on Tuesday, the day of that Bucks game. But, guys, this past week, I think we saw the Rockets do something that the Pacers, I don't know if they'll try this next week, but hear me out. The Rockets had the Thunder and the Pacers on a back-to-back. They, barely played any of their guys against the Thunder. I almost feel like, did they throw in the towel against the Thunder saying, guys, if we play even all our guys, we're probably not going to win the game. So let's not play our guys, and then let's go to Indiana the next night, more manageable opponent. Then let's try to play them at full strength without Fred VanVleet, of course.
And still lose.
And, of course, they still lost.
So,
but is that a thought at all next week? Because who do the Pacers have before the Bucks games? An incredibly banged-up Philadelphia team and a Chicago team that's heading for the lottery.
Those would be the nights if you're going to do load
management.
Like
we opened the show talking about load management.
It's playing with fire. It's not necessarily something that I heavily endorse, but you do need to live probably in a little bit of reality here. Is that something you would explore, or would you like to call me an idiot?
I think it comes down to injury management. Obviously, Tyrese is questionable tonight. I think it's like a left hip flexor or something like that. So if that's something that could be lingering, I could totally understand sitting him for a game. However, if he's available and he's ready to go, man, go out there and win. Because in my opinion, obviously the Milwaukee games are huge, but the ones leading up to those games are huge as well. So if you can, with 1-2 in a row now, if you can push that win streak to 5 against, Atlanta 2 times in the Chicago going into Milwaukee, that's a good situation to be in. So I just don't know if you want to tweak too much if guys are available.
Also, if you have those games under control, you can also limit guys' minutes as well.
This is true. This is true. Yeah. I mean, if you don't mess
it.
around like you did the other day with Chicago, you get them up, out of there early. To Jeff's point, yes, you can get some rest and you can get out of there early and have a game where Tyrese plays 30 minutes or something like that. So we'll see. But real quick, whenever I think of Atlanta on the road, I think of that's where I was when the trade broke for Tyrese Halliburton.
Really?
Yeah, shoot around that morning. Went to shoot around. Sabonis was a member of the team at shoot around, and he was not by that afternoon.
Was that day the deadline?
I want to say if it wasn't the deadline, it was close. It was like February 8th or something like that. And I remember thinking to myself, you cannot take a nap anytime during the trade deadline.
I've said this many times about that deal specifically. What an unbelievable job by Kevin Pritchard admitting that he was wrong.
Yeah.
And it was enough. Like, I think times you see people in those positions of authority, and I think you can make the case there might be one in this market right now that holds on to their beliefs too long.
Yeah.
And I think the NBA game has changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years, and I think Kevin Pritchard realized, boy, I love Turner and Sabonis. I want to make that try and work. I want to zag when everyone else zigs a little bit here, but guards are guards and wings are wings, and we need to change the face of our franchise. And obviously Halliburton became available, and voila, because if you would have held on to that any longer, I think you can make a strong argument the Pacers are still stuck in that sort of playoff drought. And remember, that playoff drought before last year was what? 6 straight years without an appearance, and was it 9 straight years without a playoff win? Or maybe it was 6 straight without a playoff win and 9 straight without a playoff series win. Those are no longer. So just great work by Kevin Pritchard. That's part of your job,
to learn and grow.
Herb Simon, Jim Irsay, in Pritchard's case and Ballard's case, I'd say both of those owners have allowed those guys to have a while at their job, and Kevin Pritchard pivoted at a really, really critical time.
Not only that, but I think we had seen what the ceiling was going to be for Turner, Sabonis, doing, as you say, zigging when everybody is zagging.
I would agree, but it's also easier said than done.
No, because they're
for someone to admit that you are wrong. Like your own stuff was wrong.
But Sabonis is a pretty talented player too. And you weren't, you knew Tyrese Halliburton was talented, but did you know he was going to be this talented?
No, that's a great point. So again, 7:30 tonight, Pacers down in the ATL.
Atlanta.
Hope it's easier than the last home game against the Rockets where they needed the late surge to pull it out, because they could use a few breathers, so to speak, going into this stretch where they have to play the Bucks twice, because that really is it could be a defining week of the entire season.
Yeah, that's
because
a great
if you fall
point.
a couple of games behind Milwaukee, it doesn't look like they're slowing down anytime soon, and now you have to play them in the first round on their home court.
I will
and
say,
you've lost
though,
again twice to Milwaukee this year, so from a split. I mean, at the very least, you would need to win both next week to try and split, and then I don't know what the divisional record tiebreaker is, but you would have to look at that.
Yeah. All right.
From a pure hate standpoint, I would love a first-round matchup between the Pacers and the Bucks. I mean, obviously, in the Pacers' case, you want the home court advantage.
Pistons?
But
I feel like the Pistons are kind of pissy.
Yeah, they are. That's another one I wouldn't mind. I was talking about this last night, actually. Met a guy at the bar, and he was talking about how he's a huge Pacers fan. And I was like, man, the Pacers, this fan base, they're always into it with somebody. It could be the Knicks, it could be the Pistons, it could be the Bucks. I am with it all because I feel like sports is the only place we can safely hate someone and it's okay. Seriously.
Heading into the Eastern Conference
That's a
playoffs,
great way
though,
to
as we're
describe it.
here in March.
I couldn't endorse that more, by the way.
This is true.
Based on that, it's absolutely true. But based on what we've been talking about, take Cleveland and Boston out of it, KB. Milwaukee right now looks like the team that could be surging, the team that you're going to have to deal with. So I really think that this is ultra important. I think this really is season-defining 8-10 days for this team.
Yeah, I think with Milwaukee, though, you still hold your breath health-wise. Lillard and Giannis, all it just takes us 1, 2, I think totally derail where they're at. But certainly, I think Milwaukee deserves some credit for getting this back on track here midseason. Obviously, the Middleton trade was a little head-scratching to me. And again, I've said a couple times this morning, I'll be fascinated to see what they do come playoff time. But guys, the Cleveland Cavaliers are putting together one of the wilder, more impressive regular seasons we've seen. They just had their third different 12-game win streak of the season last night. I still would obviously bet on Boston when it's all said and done, but I didn't think at the start of the year you would have an Eastern Conference team 8 games up on Boston with 20 to go, and it's not like the Celtics have had some catastrophic Tatum or Brown injury in that realm.
I kind of look at it like all the great teams that we've seen over the years. Boston just has to get there, and then you got to see if someone can slay the dragon. But I definitely think that Cleveland, and even the DeAndre Hunter trade was a very savvy move. We talked about wings.
Yeah, agreed.
They got a big wing who can score, defend, and switch and things like that. So we'll see. But as far as the Pacers go, I do think, to Jeff's point, this is a huge stretch in the season. I don't know if it's going to, make or break, everything. But you want to kind of show who you are. I think you got to go out there and flex some muscle and at least get one. Get one against Milwaukee and feel good about yourself because I don't think you can really feel good about that matchup. And granted, scheduling issues and what have you, if you go 0 for 4 against Milwaukee this season, I don't see why you would feel that confident facing them in the first round.
And one thing to note, Pacers, as they do hit the road here. Let's just do a morning check down and we'll get into it.
The Morning Checkdown, brought to you by the Barbasol Horizon League Basketball Championships. March starts here at the Corteva Coliseum, March 10th and 11th.
So 7:30 tonight, our airwaves at 7, Pacers and Hawks on the road. Early in the year, the Pacers were a bad road team, and Tyrese Halliburton was frankly horrific away from home. His road-home splits were ugly. For the most part, that has taken a rather significant 180. Team success been much different on the road. And for the most part, Halliburton has been better. Still not as good as he's been at home, but has been better. So that is also, I think, something to keep an eye on here. It's been a while since the Pacers have had this type of a road stretch. How do they handle it? It's 6 of 7 on the road, and then they will close with 11 of their final 15 over at Gamebridge Fieldhouse.
They get through this stretch. It sets up nicely for them down the stretch. And again, the Milwaukee games being key. And just the way the schedule worked out to have this in the middle of the road swing where you're always playing the second night of a back-to-back against Milwaukee. It's a tough stretch. Let's see how they get through it.
All right, last night at Hinkle, there were quite a few Xavier fans in the building. Senior night up there for the Bulldogs, and it was pretty typical for what we've seen here in the third season of Thad Matta with Butler. They were competitive for a half, and then a huge Xavier run right out of half. I love those Xavier jerseys last night, I must admit. My wife actually went to the game, and she came home and said, I was like, hey, what was your biggest takeaway from the game? She goes, the Xavier coach is crazy, and he sweats a lot. I'm like, yeah, that's probably a good description on Sean Miller. I also think he's a very good basketball coach. I think if Sean Miller was having a better, little run here at Xavier, I think he might be on an Indiana short list. But nonetheless, Xavier 91-78 over the Bulldogs last night. Butler will be at Creighton coming up this weekend, and then off to Madison Square Garden, where they will try to get on a magical run.
I was just going to say, did you give IU fans some Miller family PTSD right there?
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot space on the Archie aspect of it. I know it's like, people are like, yeah, Indiana would never, or Tony Bennett would never go to Indiana because they fired his sister as the women's coach, and yeah, I guess Sean Miller would never be the coach because of Archie. Is Archie having a good year at Rhode Island?
Have not paid attention.
You guys take the check down, and I'll look that up.
All right. So we got the Big Ten women's basketball tournament in town later on at noon today. We will have Oregon taking on Indiana. It's an 8-9 matchup. Last night there were 3 games. Washington beat Minnesota. It was Nebraska over Rutgers, and Iowa, without Caitlin Clark, trying to make a run here, over Wisconsin, 81-54, and Caitlin Clark was in attendance. So I think a lot of fun basketball to be watched over there.
Absolutely. I mean, again, me, lover of hate, if I'm Sidney Parrish and I left Oregon, I get to play Oregon in the Big Ten tournament.
Let's go.
Perhaps for the last time in my career. Oh, let's get you up out of here. Let's get you up out of the state. So it should be a good matchup. And honestly, jokes aside, the Sidney Parrish angle aside, they're kind of similar teams. They both need this game to basically solidify their NCAA tournament bid. So as you all say, it is bubblicious.
Yeah, different style of teams. Oregon, once it sounds like they want to play much slower than Indiana, but yeah, to your point, two bubble teams. 17-12 for our Archie Miller watchers this season. They're 6-11 in the A-10.
And Iowa head coach Jan Jensen is going to join us in about 20 minutes to round out the show.
All right, so we got you covered on that one. A couple of quick NFL notes, and the dominoes start to fall. We talked about Joey Bosa being released by the Chargers. Seahawks say they're looking to move DK Metcalf. He's demanding a trade. And the Raiders make Max Crosby the highest-paid non-quarterback in the league, KB. Getting paid.
Does that affect Dial's market at all? And I'm not joking. I know he's not obviously Max Crosby, but if
I know. Somebody asked me that earlier. Yeah, I would say in general, it's just defensive linemen get a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't, I think you're putting Dio. I get the question, but I think you're putting Dio a little bit too much on a pedestal to kind of view him in that light.
That's real.
All right, coming up in a moment, more Big Ten women's basketball tournament information and a look back at the first annual backup quarterback draft here at 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And already, I think it's just trending everywhere on social media. Is it not, Mark?
I mean, it should be.
All right, that's next. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to the Fan Morning Show on Sports Radio 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Alongside the incredible Kevin Bowen and the always up for anything James Boyd from The Athletic, doing great work over there. I'm Jeff Rickard. It's the Fan Morning Show. Mark Dykton, the man, the heart and soul, the heartbeat of the show, earlier today came up with this great idea of having the backup quarterback draft for the Colts. Why are you laughing at that, James?
No, I love how Mark, this is kids out there, being humble is overrated. Every time we stroke Mark's ego, he's like, that's right, you're 100% correct. And so, I mean, the way I was raised, being humble was for losers. So, yeah win.
Jake Query's rubbed off on you, Mark.
Oh, boy. I'll take all the compliments.
It was an excellent idea. We did do our backup quarterback draft earlier in the show. A little twist on it from a prize standpoint, going off of the crispiest dino nuggets you will see, James Boyd's delicious meal last night. We have decided that the winner of the backup quarterback draft will get a childhood food favorite from each of us. And again, we're not going to break the bank here, $5 to $10 range.
You decided what yours is?
I think I got to go Dunkaroos. I've talked about it endlessly.
Now, do you go chocolate dip or do you want vanilla?
Kind of the vanilla.
Okay.
But trust me, I am not going to discriminate here.
I'm going to make you guys work for it. You got to find the Quali Yummies, the comparison, the comp of Quali Yummies.
I don't even know what this is.
Yeah,
so
I don't know what that is either.
Start your homework now.
Yeah, start doing some research.
We've got about a handful of days before it will.
Why am I doing research when I'm going to win?
Well, easy now. Fighting words. Mark Dykton, I know you put it out on social media, but just to refresh everyone's memories on this, our draft order was a snake draft. James Boyd actually had the first pick. He elected to be at the end of the snake there. So he got 4 and 5. So the order went you, me, Jeff, and then James. And what do we come up with?
We started off, I took Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, and Gardner Minshew. That was my wild card pick since he was just released by the Raiders. Kevin went Justin Fields, Taylor Heineke, Trey Lance. Jeff went Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, and Tyler Schott from Louisville. And then James went Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, and Jacoby Brissett. And if it's not one of those guys coming to town, God help us all. Because that was a thin list we got into round 2.
I don't know. There was one name brought up right after the draft was complete. Tyler Huntley is going to be available to back up in Baltimore.
Well,
yeah,
Miami last year.
Miami last year.
Yeah,
but I think of him as last real playing time now.
Well, he almost beat the Colts last year.
Yeah, it's true. But either way, there are choices, but it comes down to what does Chris Ballard really want in a backup? Is he really looking for competition or just somebody to hold the feet to the fire there for Anthony Richardson? Because if you bring in a guy, and I don't think they would, but you bring in a guy like Sam Darnold, that's kind of it for Anthony Richardson, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to give Anthony Richardson some truth serum this morning and really hear his thoughts on how everything's kind of played out because they told us he's on board with it. And he said at the end of the season he would welcome competition. But, I mean, you have to feel a way if someone else is basically saying, hey, that job that this guy has is up for grabs. And you were drafted to be the face of the franchise. And I get it. He hasn't lived up to the expectations, whether it was injuries, whether it was inaccuracy, whether it was immaturity and being benched, whatever the case may be. But all of that in mind, I just think that I'll ask you, Kev, what do you think about just him saying it, Chris Ballard, that is, hey, it's an open competition, and saying it so early, quite frankly.
Yeah, I probably didn't put as much into the words as some others have. I mean, I get it's a big phrase, but, by all accounts, they've had a very direct conversation with Anthony Richardson much prior to the Combine about this. I mean, if you believe Chris Ballard's words, Anthony Richardson has known about this for a month and a half. So, and again, I don't, as much as I say Richardson deserves every precious rep because he needs it coming off his first healthy offseason, I also can sit here and say he hasn't earned the right to totally discredit, open competition.
That's fair.
Either there. One question I did have is, and the Colts have poo-pooed this, like playing style does not matter. They don't need a similar style quarterback of Anthony Richardson. Do you think they should? I guess on this list, while you think about that answer, on the list of guys we named, certainly Justin Fields would apply. I think Daniel Jones has some similarities as a dual threat guy. Mariota, maybe if you went back, several years ago, he'd probably fall on that list. I guess if we would have included Huntley, he would have. But, again, not a lot of names on this list that would necessarily fall into that boat.
I don't think it's a need, and I think they say that because they had some success with Gardner Minshew. And I look at it like this. Look, man, if your starting quarterback goes down in the NFL, you're going to take a big dip. And I get you probably want to have some of the same schematic things. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to pick the guy who wants you back. And so does Daniel Jones feel like he can come here and actually win the job? That's the question I have. It's not necessarily what the message is to Anthony or the rest of the team, but how do other quarterbacks view it? Do they see it as a real competition? Because if that's the case, if they've been told, hey, this really is wide open, then I'm very curious to see how camp plays out. Because we know in camp, the last time they had a real competition, so to speak, Gardner Minshew was the guy in camp, and he was better in camp than Anthony Richardson. At least I thought so. But obviously the upside and the dual threat capabilities of Anthony is why you put him in there. Would you approach it the same again if Daniel Jones is in that spot? I'm not sure.
Well, wouldn't you say, if one of the 4 guys that we selected in our first round, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, Sam Darnold, if it's not one of those 4 guys, it's not really an open competition? Would you say that?
I feel like that's.
I feel like those are the 4-tier guys that would actually give a run for the money for Anthony Richardson. If it's anybody else that we drafted, I'm sorry, that's not an open competition in my book.
But the thread of the needle here is, what do you say to the guy that you're bringing in for the open competition? You're going up against the presumed franchise quarterback. Are you really going to give me an opportunity, if I come sign with you, to truly take on the starting quarterback's role? Is that a realistic thing?
Well, the good news is you can just say those words and then you don't have to act on it for 2 months.
But they know that too.
Sign on the dotted line, and then let's see what happens in OTAs. You can lie. I know it sounds kind of harsh,
but the agent and the player know what's going on.
Well, do they? They don't know how open it's really going to be. Again, you sign here, and then we'll see how. And this gets in the debate we had yesterday of you have 2 sides to this open competition question. The one side can be, okay, you split reps every single day. It's a kick in the ass to Anthony Richardson. You got to go earn it. You've got to, those keys that I gave you at age 16, those keys are no longer there. You've got to get those keys back. Okay, that's one side. The other side is it's his first healthy NFL offseason. He's working with this fundamental throwing guru in Chris Hess that Josh Allen is very open in complimenting him for revitalizing, reshaping his accuracy career. Wouldn't that mean that every single offseason rep is beyond precious for Anthony Richardson?
You would think so.
So it's one of those 2 boats that you obviously have to look at.
It's going to be a fascinating situation to watch over the next week, 10 days, as the Colts try to remake themselves and see if Chris Ballard will live up to his words of being a little more open to bringing in outside competition, for lack of a better word. Coming up in a moment, we'll take a look at the Women's Big Ten Tournament and a coach that had a lot to do with the development of one Caitlin Clark. That's next as we continue on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to the Fan Morning Show on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
More of this, Mark Dykton. It's that time of year, March Madness. It feels like everything matters now, doesn't it, Kev? Everything is on the table now.
Shout out to Arch Madness. Coming up noon today, the Sycamores. Let's see if Matthew Graves and company can do 4 in 4 days. It's a busy Missouri Valley day locally. Again, you get Indiana State at noon. They're in the 8-9 game. You've got Evansville at 6, and then coming up 8:30 tonight, that is Valpo. All those are Central Times, by the way. I should have probably read those off in Eastern Times. Indiana State, 1 o'clock. Evansville at 7, Valpo at 9:30. All of them will have to win 4 in 4 days if they're going to get it done.
Speaking of the dance, I thought of Greg Gumbel and not having him around for this year's
selection.
Yeah, I mean, that guy was amazing from the area where I grew up in Illinois and just a legend when it comes to, March Madness and memories. And I think we all can kind of relate to this where we, tie our memories to the people who made the calls. Like the play is almost as big as the call and vice versa. So he was on the call and on the desk for a lot of cool memories for me growing up, for sure.
All right, we now turn to the Payless Liquors hotline for our next guest. We told you that the Big Ten Women's Tournament is in town. A win for Iowa last night. They got a brand new head coach after
a blowout win.
Yeah, it was a big 30-plus point win. Lisa Bluter stepping down after the Caitlin Clark run last year, and Jan Jensen elevated to being the head coach. And they've had, I think, a pretty decent year post Caitlin Clark. She joins us now on the Payless Liquors hotline. Good morning, Coach. How you doing?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Easier to come on after a 30-plus point win, isn't it?
It sure is. Man, if we could do every game like that, this would be a pretty doggone easy job.
So I'll start here, Coach Jensen. Obviously, Caitlin Clark explodes, becomes a superstar, but what's it like as a competitor to be the team post-Caitlin? And how do you think the girls you have, the women you have on your roster have responded to that and embraced that challenge of, like, we're more than – obviously, this great player, no less, but just we're more than that. We're a team, we're a program.
I think we've done a really pretty good job. When I took over, we really had this my little motto was we got next, and we're looking at the next season, the next play, the next practice – by really, being so grateful that we were part of everything that was. Caitlin is like, Michael Jordan. He will forever be associated with Carolina Blue, right? And I'm so thankful that that's what Caitlin will be. And, I think our fan base, they're pretty, passionate fan base and pretty intelligent, the core. I mean, we all understood that Caitlin is this special. We had part of this orbit for, 4 years, and now, the fever gets her. So, we just recognized it for what it was. But I think, the pressure was great, right? The expectations were high. So it took them a little time to kind of lean in to become who they were going to become. And, we started out with 10-1 non-conference, and then we hit a tough slate in the Big Ten. But the games we lost, I mean, I think we've only lost one game by double digits, and that was in the non-con against Tennessee. And so I think they've done a great job. I mean, it's hard to be in the shadows of the greatest that ever played, but I think we've done a really, really fabulous job. I'm just so proud of them, and I love them.
It was a big win last night, 81-54 for the Hawkeyes. Jan Jensen, the head coach there at Iowa, joins us now. Quick turnaround. Coach, we appreciate the time. First off, let's start there. What is life like when you get into these day-after-day tournaments? Like, could you kind of walk us through? I know you'll be later tonight, but can you walk us through what today looks like?
Well, I'm just so thankful, right? In the Caitlin era, we got to work really late, for 3 years in a row, and we got the net at the end of it. But every coach will tell you it's crazy, you're exhausted, but it's the best, right? You're just staying up late, breaking it down, getting your teams together. But it is a quick turnaround. You try to keep it pretty normal for the players, especially when you play that 9 o'clock game. Like, we didn't really roll back into the hotel after cold tubs and all the things at Gamebridge until after 11. They eat, they get to bed. We're going to eat breakfast a little later today. And then we're going to have our scout meeting at 11. And then the weird thing is you always get an hour shoot-around, but with all the teams, you only get a 30-minute shoot-around. So I took that yesterday because I was pretty prepared for Wisconsin since we just played them 3 days ago. But now, guys, we're playing Michigan State, and we played them, I think, December 12th. or something crazy in December. So we haven't seen them at all. So we reserved an auxiliary gym off campus. So I'm going to go do that from 12:30 to 1:30, so I can really go over some of their sets and have a little bit more time that isn't, a pressure cooker. And then after that, you just kind of keep it business as usual. They all have their routines, pregame meal about 4 hours before we play, which is anticipated to be 9, and got a much stronger opponent tonight. We're going to have to, it'd be nice if I could shoot 57% from the 3 again. That'd be helpful.
Certainly.
That's coaching.
See if you can bottle that up here. The
Right,
local ties, not just Caitlin Clark, also AJ Guyton's daughter. We had AJ on back earlier this year. She's a member of the Hawkeyes. Jan Jensen, the head coach of Iowa, with us here on the Payless Liquors hotline. Coach, we were very fortunate to have Caitlin on last year about midseason, and the million questions you could ask her. One question that I didn't ask her, but I feel like you would be a good person to ask, is maybe not a lot of people here locally realize what her recruitment was like. And if I have heard correctly, for a moment there, maybe you and Coach Bluter thought it would be the team up US 31 here in South Bend. Could you walk us through? I don't know if chaos is the right word, but what those final few days of that recruitment was like.
Right. Yeah, it was. Recruiting those type of kids is just, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we started that thing in junior high. And then at the end, she was from a really great Catholic high school, strong Catholic family. So anytime, Notre Dame is in the mix, any school in the country will tell you, when you're recruiting against them for a Catholic kid, it's always hard. And certainly Muffet was one of the greatest to ever coach. And so we knew we had our hands full. So at the end of it, a lot of family members, obviously, understandably, were pushing for, the Irish. A lot of other people, I think, were, hoping for us. But towards the end, she called Lisa and said, I think I'm going a different direction. And, of course, we were disappointed. And so I was kind of waiting for the announcement. The next day is kind of like you open up your Instagram and you have to see him in that doggone other uniform. I wake up in the morning, I hit her, account, nothing. So I was like, oh, geez, it's probably going to be tonight. So I look at it, nothing. So then I wait till the next day, nothing. I'm like, uh-oh. I said, wait, game on. So I contacted her, one of our AU coaches. I said, look, what is up? And he's like, well, and that's all I needed to hear. I said, can I call her? He's like, well, I think so. So I called her and she picked up. And I said, hey, what's up? And she's like, nothing. And I said, well, I didn't see anything. Are we back in business? And she's like, well, maybe. I think so. That's all we need to hear. I'm like, listen, I'm gonna have Lisa call you, blah blah blah. And so we talked, and I always had a great rapport with Caitlin. I mean, we've been through it, and I think I always understood her a little bit before everybody else did. I don't mean that arrogantly, but some of my counterparts, when you watch her, she'd get intense, and she'd get, when she'd mad at a ref or something. But when you have all these conversations with the kid, I just knew, she was wired in such a way. She was like playing basketball as likened to, she was speaking like fourth year French and everybody else was still in phonics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the frustration that she would have, it wasn't what you thought it was. So anyway, Lisa got back on the phone and we were back in play, and then she actually committed before she told her parents. Oh. So that was interesting. And then we had a good conversation with Brent and Ann, and as they say, the rest is history, and we couldn't be more grateful.
Pop the champagne after that, right?
Let's go.
Oh, we sure did.
Yeah.
Lisa brought it over.
Coach, thanks for being with us this morning. Good luck against Michigan State tonight, and we will catch up with you soon.
Hey, thanks so much, and I appreciate you covering our sport. Take care, guys. God bless, and go Hawks, and go Fever for Caitlin.
There you go. Jan Jensen, the head coach of the Iowa women's team. They'll be playing Michigan State in the Big Ten Women's Tournament later on tonight on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Kev, before we go, we have a Jiffy Lube super stat of the day.
I think it's how decorated from one great point guard. I think they might have each won the Bob Cousy Award, or certainly finalists for it, to another there, Caitlin Clark. And how about Braden Smith? Purdue sent this out yesterday. First player in the history of the NCAA, to reach these marks by the end of their junior year. 1,250 points, 700 assists, 500 rebounds. Oof. History of the NCAA.
I think he's pretty good.
And I don't think those are like obscure stats
No.
or, random or, this is the fifth-year portal guy or fifth-year COVID guy. He is quite the incredible talent. That would be Braden Smith. So Jiffy Lube, your oil change right here since 1985.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us. Great job today. Mark Dykton, star of the show today. James Boyd, Kevin Bowen. I'm Jeff Rickard. Clinton Yates up next. Jake at noon.